Thank you, Grassroots TV, and for all the members of the public who are here on our audience and on Zoom or Facebook Live. It is the City of Aspen regular meeting of May 27th, 2025. Nicole, will you call the roll, please?
Councillor Benedetti.
Here.
Councillor Doyle. Councillor Guth.
Here.
Councillor Rose.
Here.
Mayor Richard.
Here. We are now called to order, and we do not have scheduled public appearances today, but so we will move quickly into citizens' comments and petitions. Are there any members of the public who would like to address council?
My name is Charlie Tarver, and my question is, who should represent affordable housing interests? Situation, affordable housing, mixed-use complex, free market, there's a yard, they want to change from common element to limited common element. Now, affordable housing people say, we can't deal with it because we already sold it to you, it's yours. City people say, we can't deal with it because it's not ours. We're reducing the, I don't really care about a yard. I don't spend much time there. White River is my yard. But it's a bad precedent when someone can take affordable housing assets right to a yard for employees who own affordable housing and give it away and take it away. It can be done by a vote, but they're voting against the interests of the good of Aspen. Who is those? So even Kiowa says it's illegal. I can sue them if I want. That means I have to go hire a lawyer and sue them for doing something that's wrong. What if they reinstate slavery? Do I have to sue them, or is somebody else going to look out for them? I asked you 2 weeks ago about this, and they since have brought up, because someone's window is closest to the yard, he didn't think I should be able to sit there. This is a common area. They've already put locks on certain common areas that we should be able to get to, like a boiler room or a maintenance room, to see what's causing the big noise that's right next to my bedroom. No noise. Prove there's noise. Get a recording. Bring it. It's not my job. I don't really care about this stuff, but it seems that there's a weakness in our system if nobody's willing to stick up for it.
Yeah. Charlie, I am vaguely familiar with your situation from last week and this week. I have to say this really is an HOA concern among tenants, and there is Alpine Legal Services that was put together to help tenants, owners or renters with those sort of disputes. And so you mentioned suing and not wanting to get a lawyer, but I think investigating the rights that were in your original title and deed to your property with Alpine Legal Services is the direction I can point you in.
Okay. I don't care if I'm taking out my rights. I care I'm taking away from affordable housing that's owned by the community. Okay, if they took away affordable housing asset.
Yeah. I understand. Hunter Creek just took away the barbecue pits for the summer. They said it's just too dangerous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional members of the public who would like to speak to us on items not on tonight's agenda? Is there anyone online? Oh, Tony, there you are. Come on over.
I was in the corner.
Yeah, didn't see you there.
Before I start, Mayor Richards, is it okay if I give a handout from the entrance to Aspen Record of Decision for easy reference for council members?
If you'd like to, please.
Thank you. Okay. Quickly, four quick things. First is
For the record, you are?
Oh, I'm so sorry. For the record, my name is Tony Kronberg.
Thank you.
The very first thing I'd like to suggest is that, as we know, we've been operating with the entrance to Aspen under the name of the Castle Creek Bridge. If anyone wants to know what's going on now, they have to go to the Castle Creek Bridge. I would recommend that we start a new web page just on where we are right now.
I've recommended that already to Jen Oden, and
you
they'll
so
start
much.
working on that.
Okay, next thing. Tomorrow at noon, the Board of County Commissioners are taking public comment on a resolution that they're asking themselves. They want to know if the Board of County Commissioners want to approve or endorse a resolution to reevaluate the entrance to Aspen. So I just wanted to put that out to the public. Public comment is being taken during the meeting on the resolution asking if the Board of County Commissioner wants to endorse a reevaluation of the preferred alternative in the 1998 Record of Decision, entrance to Aspen. I just would like to comment that this is before the City of Aspen has finished up with the Jacobs report. You have not made a decision yet as to whether you want to do an EIS or reevaluation. That comes in June, so I personally think it's a little premature for them to vote on an endorsement when nobody really knows what's going on with it. The next thing is the survey. This is really crucial. A lot of people don't understand that we already are in the process to evaluate the entrance to Aspen. There's a survey online, it's called aspencommunityvoice.com. This is a first opportunity for people to make a comment that will be integrated into the proposal that City Council is going to decide on in June, whether to ask CDOT and the feds if they want to do a reevaluation or an EIS. And it's really crucial. We're not sure when it's going to close, but I'm asking people to please go to aspencommunityvoice.com. There's a survey and an interactive map, and it's really crucial. Then the next thing, the handout that I just gave to you, you have a, maybe we could pull it from the consent calendar. It's resolution number 80. Rachel, would you prefer that I make my points then when you're pulling the resolution? It's on your goals, or would you like to make my comments now?
Make your comments now, Tony. I don't think we're going to be pulling that. And if we pull it, there won't be public comment. It would be council discussion.
Okay, so really quickly, what I'd like to do is, the goals are great. I would like to see them tied into the record of decision. The piece of paper that I just gave you is a handout from the record of decision, and it says, in 1991, the three Upper Valley governments, the city of Aspen, Pickens County, and the town of Snowmass Village, adopted a joint resolution to collectively address and solve the three main transportation issues: traffic congestion, traffic safety, and air pollution. And in your resolution, there's not mention of air pollution. The next thing, that intergovernmental agreement, just three last things, they're really quickly. Thank you, Rachel. It says travel demand management strategies is the first one. That's included in the whereas. The second one is transportation enhancements to the existing roadway system for both automobiles and buses. That's not in the resolution. And the third one is the development of a fixed guideway system, and that's not in the resolution. And what I'm trying to do is just make sure that we coordinate our efforts with what's already been.
Tony, the summary you've handed out is a summary of what led to the half penny being asked by the three governmental bodies. It is not, it is part of the summary of the history leading to the record of decision. But it is a guiding document over the half penny, not over the EIS.
Well, this is what the Transportation Coalition is working on, the outside group.
Tony, I'm very familiar with that.
So if we could incorporate them into your goals, that'd be great. Otherwise, we're missing two of those elements.
This is from the EOTC. This is a different document. It is not about everything else you're talking about.
The
But thank you.
EOTC is ingrained in the record of decision.
Are there any other members of the public who had come to address us on items not on tonight's agenda? There being none, I will close the public hearing comment section, and we will move to special orders of the day. So this is a time for council members and mayor comments. Who would like to start?
Happy to.
Mr. Guth?
Thanks. Let me just pull up this email. First thing I wanted to talk about is Tooth Park, as we've talked about at this table, is scheduled for replacement this summer, which I am excited about. But due to some constraints at the end of the project, it's scheduled to start in June, July? July. And I had asked Pete whether there's an opportunity to delay that and push this to later in the summer, given that it's adjacent to so many businesses, it's such a used park, and sort of construction there will be disruptive. I suggested exploring whether a tent could be used to pour the soft surface material, which happens at the very end of the project, which is what's weather sensitive and the reason for the early start. Pete said it could be done in theory, but could incur costs of 50 to 100, is that the range you gave me? 50 to 100 additional, 50 to 100,000 additional dollars. So I wanted to sort of make everyone aware of that and see if there's interest in exploring pushing that back as late as we could and tenting it for the final phase where that soft surface would be poured. I'm in favor of it, but wanted to check in with the four of you.
Thank you. I think our manager would like to make a comment.
Just wanted to add.
If I missed anything.
No,
please.
you didn't misrepresent anything, but the additional pieces that were in there were the fact of the delivery of the actual playground and installation of that. We were trying to pace in tandem with things like Ruggerfest and Motherlode. So there's a bit of an issue whether we push this a little bit later too, because that could really affect the timing on that stuff as well.
Thank you. Let's see, council members, do you have thoughts off the top of the head or would like to think about that perhaps a little bit and then be able to give a response? I would kind of want to keep moving forward with the schedule. I realize it's awkward and difficult, but so is half the road construction that we have out there right now too, and costs are important. Anyone else? Sam?
I'd rather give a response on June 10th in the next meeting to think about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, same. I'd be curious more on timeline, how it affects everything specifically.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Bill?
So should we have Pete maybe come back with a little bit of additional information
I
on
think
what
he's
the
taking
impact would
notes
be?
already to bring that back for
And
us.
I know I didn't give you an opportunity for a super detailed response on that, so.
Okay,
Great. Secondly, this is something that came up during our retreat as an example that you asked for, Rachel, of some things that we could do better in terms of serving locals. And I think it's quite timely that we have this public hearing this evening on 790 Castle Creek Drive, which is asking for something along these lines. But I wanted to take everyone's temperature on a concept that I brought up you may or may not remember. But right now, the way that employee housing mitigation is assessed on locals is there's an opportunity for locals to defer their impact fees, their mitigation fees, but it's not deferred at a fixed rate. It's deferred until such time as you sell the property to a non-local, or maybe to anyone. I'm not sure exactly what happens in that circumstance. But you then take the risk of paying the employee housing mitigation rate in effect at that time. And so it's quite a gamble, and because of that, it's very rarely utilized. And I'd like to float the idea with you guys, and we don't have to, obviously, we shouldn't pass this tonight, but if you're in support of it, I think we should ask Pete and Ben to come back with a resolution to change this. But I'd propose a much more local-friendly way of doing this would be to stipulate what the employee housing mitigation fee, total fee would be at the time of certificate of occupancy, and then you pay that amount at such point at such time as you decide to sell the property.
Well, I think we might be able to discuss that a little later on this evening. I think it would take a larger policy resolution to want to change our code. I think matters such as the time value of money and perhaps an interest rate for carrying that, if it's not going to be changed later or adopted later if times have changed. I think the cost of constructing housing does go up over kind of in a compounded and inflationary way over time. So it's the housing that you don't have now. But it's something worth weighing the
Yeah,
pros and
I
cons
can
as a
understand
board,
that.
and I'm just suggesting we have a larger discussion about that.
Would love to do that. So that's what I wanted to check in, to see what everyone's temperature is on discussing that further and exploring something which I think would be quite a local-friendly amendment to our code.
Okay, thank you. Did you have anything else tonight?
Those are the two.
Thank you.
Just
We don't have to go in order if you're not ready, Sam, or if you have anything.
Go that way first.
I'm happy to go. School is out on Tuesday, and I mention this because the school calendar is adjusted this year. They start August 13th. It's almost 2 weeks earlier than in previous years. Next spring, they will be out in May, around Memorial Day, and I bring it up just as a point of conversation as we talk about congestion, impacts on housing. We'll have kids in school for 2 weeks while the Music Fest is still running, so just something to look out for as our kids are out for summer.
Thank you.
Yes. Board and commission applications, I'm not sure if you were going to mention this, Rachel.
No, go ahead.
Board and commission applications are due tomorrow. We have a lot of vacancies. If you, some of the issues that we're talking about tonight, fee in lieu, top of slope adjustment, if you want to be on, on planning and zoning, you can get the chance to weigh in on some of these. So we, please, if you're interested and want to participate, apply for your boards and commissions. We'll do those interviews in June.
Thank you. Thank you very much. John?
Yeah, as we all know, and here, Independence Pass opened for the season, and I went up there over the weekend, and I was struck by how many dead trees are lining both sides of the road up to the pass. This is the weekly river report from the Roaring Fork Conservancy. Rivers across the Roaring Fork watershed are flowing well below average for this time of year, 27% to 42% of normal. Due to recent cool and cloudy days which slowed snowmelt, this year's runoff has been particularly poor due to below-average snowpack and unseasonably warm spring temperatures. As we head into summer, the watershed is already experiencing moderate and severe drought, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor. Now is the time to start thinking about water conservation. For those working on their lawns or gardens this holiday weekend, please choose native drought-tolerant plants. I think it's pretty obvious we're going to have a long fire season this summer. Actually, there is no fire season, I'm sorry. It goes year-round. But I'd like everybody to please be mindful of the fires you build and pay attention to what the Sheriff's Department and the Fire Department are telling us about fire restriction. And if you have any questions about hardening your home, please visit aspenfire.com. And there are many ways you can help yourself in the event of a fire. Thanks.
Thank you. I think it's worth noting we are likely to go into a drought protocol as a city and ask people to not overplant. And for the health of our gold medal trout fisheries, it's a good idea not to over-fertilize either. That tends to really concentrate in the waters this time of year. Sam?
Yeah, I just wanted to let the council know that John and I had our first interview with a recruitment firm for the city manager search and are looking at 2 others tomorrow, so that is underway and going smoothly.
Okay.
And the other thing is, it will be Pete's comments, but I just wanted to express my excitement to hear about the food tax refund, since that was something that has doubled and got back up to where it should be, and I hope all these locals in the crowd partook in it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have some announcements on behalf of the city to make at this point. One is upcoming events at the Red Brick, and we'd like to invite everyone to a special evening of art at the Red Brick Center on Thursday, June 5th at 5 p.m. The free event will feature the opening of 2 incredible exhibitions. First, the 2025 Colorado Juried exhibition is a dynamic collection of work by talented artists from across Colorado. And secondly, they're going to be presenting Wendy Schneider's Reverent Alchemy, a stunning series of nature and photographs of wildlife printed on delicate paper and finished with hand-applied gold leaf. It will be a beautiful night, and we're celebrating our community's creativity and the community itself. So we hope to see you there. That's Thursday, June 5th. The other announcement relates to getting ready for your 4th of July float. And the special events team is excited to announce that applications to participate in the 4th of July parade are now available and will close on June 20th. This all is on aspenspecialevents.com for enrolling for that sort of thing. And we're also accepting nominations for the Grand Marshal position for the parade. Nominees should either reside or work in Aspen and have made significant contributions to the community over the past years. Nominations will be reviewed by the parade committee, which will make its decision at the end of June. And so for more information on participating in the parade or to nominate someone for Grand Marshal, please visit aspenspecialevents.com. Thank you very much for those. And we will now move on to any agenda amendments. Are there any agenda amendments, Pete?
No, Mayor.
No. Thank you very much. We would now move on to city manager's comments.
Just to follow up on Sam's announcement that food tax refund checks have gone out. It may take a little while to go through the mail process down to Glenwood and back. So if you haven't received yours yet today, don't panic, but it should hopefully be there by the end of the week, I would imagine. In total, it was a little over $315,000 that went out the door this year. That's a 26% increase over 2024. And that was basically for 2,391 different individuals of our community.
Thank you very much. I received mine, so the mails are working.
There you go. The only other thing I'd point out is there were 2 info-only memos in the packet for today as well. One was around forest health, which is kind of in line with the Arbor Day proclamation that's coming up here, which did talk about how we divide the city into 6 zones and basically focus zone by zone on trying to improve forest health. For 2024, they spent a lot of time in the outlying areas and east of Aspen, planted roughly 150 new trees, pruned about roughly that amount as well, and cut down about another 70-some just to preserve our healthy community forest. 2025 is going to focus on Smuggler Mountain and areas around the golf course. And then the other memo was just to highlight public art that's going to be taking place for this summer. That includes the new exhibit that's here in City Hall, as well as some of the intersections along Galena between Hopkins and Cooper, and some installations out at Pepkey and Francis Whitaker Park. So it'd be good to check those out as you partake in the areas around town.
Thank you very much for that, Pete, and I'm sure we'll have ongoing announcements with those as they have either their opening ribbon cutting or celebrations surrounding. And so that sounds really good. We will now move on to board reports. Does anyone want to start on that? John?
I don't have any.
Oh, that makes it easy.
Yeah.
Christine?
I don't have any. I don't have any.
Okay, thank you.
Likewise, none.
No? No? Okay, well, I'm stuck with a lot of them here then. I would just like to mention that we did have elected officials transportation committee meeting last week on Thursday up in Snowmass with Snowmass and Pitkin County. And the elected officials transportation committee allocated, was it $275,000 to the fare-free RAFTA bus pilot program experiment this fall. And so there's going to be a lot of work getting the word out about that and some tracking mechanisms to really understand how that will influence ridership and reducing congestion. So that was a really good presentation. We did hear further from Jacobs Engineering and discussed different pathways forward at some level. There was the ACRA meeting this morning, which I attended, and so I'd like to talk for a moment about they have put together with our sister city in Queenstown a Highlights of New Zealand trip, which would be taking place this November 2025, USA to Auckland, to Christchurch, to Queenstown, and then back to the USA. It is 14 days because the air travel takes a while, and 11 nights there. So there is a land only, a Aspen from Aspen Airport, and a single supplemental if you're not 2 people going. But it should be a lot of fun, and it's a kind of an evolution of our sister city relationship with Queenstown. Chamber is very happy to have helped put that together. Then today at the chamber meeting, it was certainly mentioned that we're looking forward to a very busy summer with a lot of things going on. But kind of post 4th of July, after that, they're seeing a softening in reservations. And we're, tracking that. There's a lot of last minute and fill in as people see what the weather's doing. But we are starting the summer of free music, whether it's up in Snowmass or down in Basalt, and a lot of activities for all of us. I had to note that we are concerned with both the Forest Service cutbacks that will affect the recreation and the outdoors and the public lands, which are really severe in terms of personnel to remove fallen trees from trails, trash from campsites, put out campfires that are not appropriately tended to, and to really greet our guests. They're moving to a telephone-only system for people who normally would like maps to see what's going on or would like to talk to someone in person. The cutbacks are severe. They're not sure how tree permits for Christmas cutting and things like that will go other than by phone and online. They're not really planning on staffing in person. And these cuts are really affecting us very seriously. The potential for the Medicaid cuts was also discussed. I brought it up, and then so did Dave Ressler from the Aspen Valley Hospital. As you know, hospitals must treat when someone comes in with an emergency or something else, and those who lose their insurance tend to use the emergency room as a doctor's room. Those things unfortunately just rebound right to the single payer and the group policies in the following year as hospitals have to negotiate the rates with those insurers to kind of make up for their losses and keep a balanced budget. So we're seeing some really severe cuts coming down to the services that traditionally have been a partnership with the federal government. That's affecting our food banks. It's affecting grants to all sorts of agencies that our locals, our communities, our nonprofits rely on. I think that's very unfortunate. There was also noted in the newspapers over the weekend that a lot of our international foreign airlines are cutting back on their services to the United States because of decreased demand. So whether it's Swiss Air or Lufthansa or British Airways, they're just not seeing the guests wanting to come who have traditionally wanted to visit the Grand Canyon or the Rockies or other hot spots in the country. So that's really of concern for all of us who are watching our budgets and watching the economy that supports so many of our amenities here in Aspen. So that is, I think, covers, the final comment on board reports would be that this council had a retreat last week on Monday and Tuesday, and we will be later in this meeting discussing our kind of a cheat sheet of the goals that were derived at for our community. The top council priorities, we tried to keep it a little bit in check, I would say, this year, instead of coming up with a couple dozen different priorities as to what we really can get done. We're working on the Armory Hall is top of mind for all of us. The very clearly needed lumberyard affordable housing project and the entrance to Aspen are the top council priorities. We also have goals that we're going to be working on and principles of how we would like to do business. So other council goals are early childhood education, programmatic enhancements and optimization, resource and infrastructure resilience, including fire safety. I think that it will be a topic of discussion, fire evacuation and fire safety with the Board of County Commissioners we're meeting with next week in a joint meeting. And then traffic flow and congestion relief, which certainly is what can we do now before larger projects begin, and how we can continue to manage those issues. We know we have more drive traffic in the summer than we do in the winter. And even without the schools being open on Memorial Day, we saw certainly a lot of traffic as usual. So we hope to accomplish these goals through the following principles: improvement of core service delivery through process improvements with the customer in mind, and the customer is our community. Staff support and retention, and an outcome focused of all the measures or programs we choose to implement, and those sort of improvements to core service delivery. So that was our week last week, and we will now move on to a proclamation for Arbor Day. And I don't think we really have a framed copy. We're going to do that later. But I will like to read this for the public. And as I read it, reminding you that this coming June 7th is our Arbor Day celebration, and that will be held in Pepke Park from 9 to 11 o'clock. We're still doing free trees there at the celebration?
Yes, we are. So
Come on up to a microphone, give us a little word on this. And just introduce yourself for the record.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is David Kuhn. I'm the city forester with the Parks Department. And yeah, if I could say a few words about Arbor Day and kind of
Please.
what we're doing. Okay. We, the city of Aspen, are proud owners and stewards of approximately 13,000 public trees. The Woodland Trust calls trees the ultimate carbon capture machines and multitaskers in the fight against global climate change. As it stands, our community forest will store or avoid almost 36 million pounds of CO2, in addition to trapping tons of pollutants, avoiding soil loss and pollution of our rivers and ecosystems. And then there are the innumerable social and economic benefits they provide. So,
And more about the event
yeah,
on
to
Saturday.
reiterate, this year, and so thus, that's why we celebrate Arbor Day here in Aspen. And this year we are celebrating 33 years as a Tree City USA, being recognized as outstanding in terms of how we steward our community forest. And we hope that Mayor Richards and members of Aspen City Council and everybody, that you will join us on Saturday, June 7th at Pepke Park for our celebration.
Thanks.
Come get a tree.
Yeah, come get a tree for your yard, and just don't plant it too close to your house anymore for fire mitigation. So that's the whole trick of it. So I'll read the proclamation for you. A proclamation of the City of Aspen, Colorado, incorporated 1881. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday is called Arbor Day, it was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska and is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, beautify our community, and are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. And whereas the City of Aspen has been recognized as a Tree City USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation, and now, therefore, be it resolved that the mayor, city council, and the citizens of Aspen hereby proclaim June 7th, 2025 as Arbor Day in the city, and we urge all citizens to support efforts to care for our trees and woodlands and support our city's community forestry program for this and future generations. So thank you very much for that. There we go. And we will now move on to our consent calendar. There are 4 items altogether on the consent calendar today. Resolution number 71, a series of 2025, and they are the SCADA improvements, which is the telemetry system for our water systems and water tanks to be able to communicate back and forth with each other. The resolution number 76, series of 2025, the agreement between the City of Aspen and Gillig LLC for the purchase of 1 battery electric bus. That is a single bus for the city, but we do combine it with the RAFTA larger purchase to be economies of scales in terms of pricing. Resolution number 80, series of 2025, adopting the city priority projects and goals, which I really simply just read to everyone here earlier, and the draft minutes of May 13th, 2025. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
If I could, I have a question on 76 and a comment on 80.
Okay. Do we need to pull those, or can we have a motion to approve?
I think we could talk about them first and then
Okay.
decide whether.
So let's go on with 76 first.
Thanks. But one question on this is this a proposal for $1.25 million purchase for an electric bus? I'd just like us all to be aware of what a non-electric bus equivalent costs. So wondering if someone
Let
might
me
be able
ask
to-
Lynn to come on up and discuss that.
Good evening. Lynn Rumbaugh with Transportation, a diesel bus from Gillig with all of the same options applied. It'll be about $700,000.
700, so 80-something% premium. Okay, just curious on that.
Yeah. Well, it also is a greater fuel reduction after the fact. You're not buying the diesel fuel at a really high price. You're working with our electric, hydroelectric for the life of the bus.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sure.
And then number 80, this is really directed at council to see what your recollection is, but on the comment on the bottom right about these will be reviewed and accomplished through the following principles. The first one, which we talked a lot about and is important to me, improvement of core service delivery through process improvement with the customer in mind. I didn't intend for that to be limited just to our goals and our priority projects. I intended for that to be across, I really want process improvement and core service delivery to be improved throughout the organization.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying with the wording there.
Yeah, so I wanted to check in with everyone on that and see if there's a better way to word this so that it doesn't feel like it's limited just to these 6 things on the left side of the page.
I think it's just a matter of the lead-in sentence being, broadened a little bit. These council priority projects and council goals, as well as other service delivery, shall be accomplished, reviewed, accomplished through the following principles. Would that do it for you, Bill?
Or maybe, I think we could maybe shorten it and say something like the following principles will be applied through all work
Okay.
done by the organization or something like that.
How do others feel about language change along those lines?
I'm fine with that, and I'd just note that the resolution is actually more broad.
Yeah.
Language, so.
I did not look at that.
This was just a kind of a short note for the
Synopsis.
public, perhaps.
Thanks for pointing that out, Christina. I did not look at the resolution.
It says, whereas governmental and community services can be improved through additional focus on community needs, customers, and effective responsive delivery of services.
Great, so I'm fine with the resolution wording as is. I'd like to, and I don't think that the handout necessarily ties to the resolution, right? This is sort of
Yeah.
a separate piece of work, so if we could improve on that before we finalize it, I'd be super appreciative.
Yeah,
Great.
that sounds good.
In that case, I'll make a motion to approve consent calendar unless anyone else has anything on consent
Well,
calendar.
just make your motion. Let's see what happens from there.
Perfect. I'll make a motion to approve consent calendar.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any other council member comments on the motion? No. Okay. Will you call the roll, please, Nicole?
Counselor Benedetti?
Yes.
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Richards?
Yes. Thank you very much. We have no items that are notice of call-up, so we will move on from that. And we'll have the first reading of ordinances. This is ordinance number 4, series of 2025, the City of Aspen Clean Air Act updates.
All right, good evening, Mayor Richards and City Council. My name is Natalie Sevdos. I'm the Air Quality Program Manager for the City of Aspen, and I work in the Environmental Health and Sustainability Department. And tonight I'm here to present proposed updates to the City of Aspen Clean Air Act, which is our non-smoking ordinance. So to start with the purpose up front, the purpose of the City of Aspen Clean Air Act is to protect the public from exposure to secondhand smoke. So this is to regulate smoking in public places and create safe, healthy spaces for the public to enjoy. The city's Clean Air Act was first passed in 1985, and what that did was basically eliminate smoking in indoor public places, so things like restaurants, bars, offices, retail stores, and this was one of the first, Aspen was one of the first municipalities in the state to regulate smoking in indoor places, so at the time this was really unique. Since then, the state has passed their own version of a Clean Air Act. That was first passed in 2006, and they amended that again in 2019. The biggest update in 2019 was the inclusion of, or adding the prohibition of vaping anywhere that smoking is also not allowed. So it was kind of a modernization with new technology, I guess. And so where we are today is that the city's ordinance is essentially superseded by the state act, and that has led to some confusion when we're handling customer complaints or customer questions and talking to businesses about what are the rules and what is allowed. So a solution that we're proposing today is to update the city's Clean Air Act to align with the state act to cut down on confusion and also modernize our Clean Air Act. The biggest change in what we're proposing from what exists now to what is in the proposed city ordinance is, again, just that inclusion of the language of vaping being prohibited anywhere that smoking is not allowed. And again, that's indoor public spaces and certain outdoor spaces that have additionally been designated as non-smoking. Our existing ordinance doesn't address vaping at all. This proposed update would align with what is in the state act, which again is that vaping is not allowed anywhere that smoking is not allowed. The state act essentially prohibits smoking indoors in public places. It allows local jurisdictions to be more strict and to regulate outdoor spaces, so that's something that the city historically has done. We have a few designated outdoor non-smoking areas, which is the city-county campus out here, and then the Arc Bridge, which is the bridge between Aspen High School and the Aspen Recreation Center. So in addition to adding that definition of electronic smoking device and changing our language to prohibit vaping anywhere smoking is prohibited, another change would be smoking and vaping would not be allowed in outdoor public places when being used for a public special event. And another change would be that businesses would not be required to post no smoking signs at all of their public entrances. This is also a change that aligns with the state act. They do not have a signage requirement. So the main benefit, I think, of updating our ordinance at this time would be is that it would cut down on some of that confusion. It would provide a really clear understanding for staff on the rules around smoking and vaping, and then in turn, when we're working with citizens and working with businesses, everything would just be a little bit more clear for everybody. This update would also remove some antiquated regulations that are no longer enforceable. We can't be less strict than the state, so we can't enforce anything that's less strict than that. And then the other benefit to maintaining the city's ordinance is that the city would be able to make future changes, as council sees fit, and be responsive to local needs or things happening in the community. So I'll open it up for any questions you have for me.
Thank you. No questions? No questions?
Here.
Okay. I appreciate you bringing this forward and the work on it very much so. It was a number of years ago, I went down to testify at the State House about flavored vape products and prohibiting those. the ability to get addicted to vaping for our young teens and kids in school. And actually, those people testifying, I think, swayed the legislative panel more than anyone else, talking about what they're seeing actively happening in the junior high and high school. And I think the health implications have become very, very severe. I think it's worth seeing if you could bring a little information on that at the next meeting. I've been reading about the condition that they call popcorn lung, which came from workers in the popcorn factories absorbing a lot of the flavorings and things that are going on to the kernels, and it creates permanent lung damage. There's no going back. And so they're starting to see young people who have developed a vaping habit later very quickly develop a popcorn lung situation and not able to breathe. So I think it's really important that we move forward with this. And just for the public discussion, I'd like to have a little more information about this. So this would not affect someone who is vaping on the Hyman Avenue Mall or walking on sidewalks. Those are not the public areas you discussed.
So those outdoor areas are not designated specifically as non-smoking. However, there is a rule, this is already in our ordinance and in the state ordinance, that you can't smoke or vape within 25 feet of the main public entrance to a business where smoking is not allowed. So that, you know, essentially
Takes care of
covers a
sidewalks.
huge, yeah, that covers a huge area.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's make sure we go over all the implications so the public knows what we're talking about in the ordinance as opposed to just the updates and the changes. And I fully support that. Is there a motion for the first reading of ordinance number 4, series of 2025 by our city clerk?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
I don't think we can do that by.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I have to do a
Sorry,
roll call.
everything's a roll call here.
Counselor Benedetti?
Yes.
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Richards?
Yes, thank you.
Ordinance number 4, series of 2025, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Aspen, Colorado, repealing Chapter 13.16, Smoking in Public Places of the City of Aspen Municipal Code, entitled the City of Aspen Clean Indoor Air Act, and replacing it with a new Chapter 13.16 entitled the City of Aspen Clean Air Act.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve ordinance number 4, the City of Aspen Clean Air Act updates on first reading?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Nicole, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Benedetti?
Yes.
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Richards?
Yes. Thank you very much, and thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
We will now move into our public hearings section of the agenda. The first item up is resolution number 72, series of 2025, 790 Castle Creek Drive. I think we'll have the appropriate staff and any and all applicants who'd like to be at the table, come on up.
Good evening, Mayor Richards and City Council. For the record, Haley Hart, Long Range Planner. To my right is Patrick Raleigh, who's the representative for the applicants. We're going to start with Patrick doing a presentation followed by a staff presentation. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to share our slide decks. Do you want to use this clicker or you can use this?
Should I?
So-
Yeah, I can do that.
Yep.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Patrick Raleigh, Raleigh Design Planning. Hope everybody having a nice afternoon. We are here on behalf of Jim, Cerise, and Carolyn Barabee for GMQS longtime local demolition allotment, affordable housing mitigation deferral that Councilor Guth mentioned earlier, and special review for top of slope determination. So Jim and Carolyn wish to replace the existing single-family residence and replace it with a duplex for themselves as they age and eventually for their children and grandchildren. Their father purchased the property in 1956, and this has been the family home ever since then. So it's a extremely long period of time that they've been living on this property. So Jim and Carolyn currently with their spouses share the single-family residence. It acts similar to a duplex, but due to the age of the structure and this living situation, it's time for a refresh of the structure. Both Jim and Carolyn were employed by Aspen Skiing Company. Jim, I think, goes from 1974, and Carolyn was a few years later in 1977. Leo, it was Carolyn's husband, was also a ski patrolman, and Nancy, who is Jim's wife, also worked locally. So we have 4 longtime locals living in this house. In addition to the other matters that I mentioned, the family does request that we look at the longtime local fee reductions and waivers to help protect what is left of Old Aspen. Very few people are left that can say they fulfill these longtime local timeframes that we're talking about here tonight. So it's not a huge population, but it's a very meaningful population to ensure that the community that we talk so frequently about is preserved. I'd like to point out, these are just a few images that we have from the family. I believe that's Martin Cerise, correct? The father practicing his archery on what is now Castle Creek Drive. There's a 1965 picture of what the Castle Creek drainage looked like, and then the cute kids on a go-kart having fun in what is Castle Creek Drive, and the houses in behind. So here's the subject parcel. We are directly south of the Red Butte Cemetery. We actually share a property line. As you can see, the parcel extends all the way down to Castle Creek and then is bounded by Castle Creek Drive on the west. This is the survey of the property. You can see that length of property. Really only the left-hand side of the page is developable. That is above the top of slope, above the embankment that leads down to Castle Creek. You can see there's areas of steep slope. We've also delineated on here part of the, whoa, this is a little jumpy. This is the agreed upon top of slope. It's very evident from the topographic grade break that's there. And you can also see that there is a offset. Sorry, this is very, that's the required top of bank offset. The family has agreed to remove any improvements that have been made. There's some old steps that once led down the hill. So we will remove that, and all proposed development will stay beyond the top of slope setback. These are the existing conditions. You can see the house has been added on to through the years. When it was originally constructed in 1956, it was, we'll see some pictures of it momentarily. You've already seen some. Largely in this location with some additions made to the back. This is what the existing house looks like from the back. So we're looking west with the bluff, the drainage behind us. And then this is the Castle Creek with the pass beyond. That's a view that will remain unchanged. This is the site plan. You can see that there are 2 driveway entrances leading to a garage on the north side, and then the existing drive that will lead to a garage on the south side. Here is 1 unit, and then the second unit. And the existing ponds are existing. What we're showing there have been slightly enhanced, but they are existing ponds that is fed off of the ditch that comes down Castle Creek Drive. This is the proposed architecture. We do have the site architects, Erica Golden here, and she can answer some questions, but clean design. And obviously this is from Castle Creek Drive, so this is the front view, being very careful to adhere to residential design standards with front porch elements and garages that don't face the street. And I think it will be a nice addition to Castle Creek Drive. This is the view from the back. So we're looking west, and this is the eastern side of the homes. You can see the pond, which will be a feature that we'll utilize in the demising of the rear yard, with some decks in the back for the family to enjoy. So the applicants and site architects have worked very, very hard to keep this project at $875 a square foot, which is pretty much unbelievable, when most projects start at around $2,000 a square foot. So I think that's a testament to, this is a home that is going to be lived in by the people that are building it and paying for it. That price per square foot was accomplished through modest finishes. We're, of course, meeting all of the building requirements. We have a unique construction. It's a panelized system to aid in the constructability and also the efficiency of the design. And again, if you have specific questions, site architects can respond to this. This will be an all-electric building, and we are ready to go for an all-electric expedited permit process, should we receive approval this evening. As I mentioned earlier, great care was taken to adhere to the residential design standards. Here is our approval that we received. There were no variances required, and that has been taken care of. We've also worked with the engineering department to get the variance for the 2 curb cuts. So cleared that hurdle. Generally, 1 driveway is allowed per residence, but when you, or per parcel, but when you have a duplex, obviously, to make it efficient, you have 2 curb cuts. And so you can see the curb cut here on the north, that is an access and an apron to a garage area, and then we have the existing driveway right here. So this is a family home for now and in the future, we hope. And so the history of the family goes back, they were living in Woody Creek, and Martin moved the family to the current site 69 years ago in 1956. The residence was built shortly thereafter in 1957, a very simple structure. And the house was actually transferred to Jim and Carolyn in 1981, where they live as tenants in common. All of this information was detailed in the land use application when I provided the affidavit for the longtime local demolition allotment. The intent has always been to pass the home to the family. And we have members of the next generation and of the generation following with us tonight in council chambers. So it's fun to see. The family laments somewhat, but has seen many, many colorful characters of the community come and go because of the issues that surround staying here, the cost, and the pull of being able to sell your property. But Jim and Carolyn have not done that. That's not their desire. They want to pass it on, and their children wish to live in this house as well. But we need a little bit of help. So this is probably a precursor of the 2 tenants in common. The house was modest back then, but maybe not much more than today. But so that's Jim and Carolyn as children, somewhere on the side yard, probably adjacent to the cemetery, likely. So there's that original house that was built in 1957. I think it's important to note there are no trees on the property. This is actually before the trees that were planted by their father were planted. And you can get a slice of what everything looked like in 1961, uncommon. So as I mentioned, the house has been added on to over the years, and this was largely done by the family. There's a picture of Jim with an excellent mustache, showing a certain time in the past. And, some additions that were made and garages that were built that were handled by the family. So this is truly a residence of their making. There were weddings. Both of Jim and Carolyn had their wedding in the back. That's AI. I don't know where that came from. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very clear from the application, we meet the criteria for the long-time local demolition allotment. And we, look forward to receiving that. The affordable housing deferral would be extremely helpful. Now, it's not a perfect situation. It does kick the can down the road and does possibly saddle somebody down the road. So, we can talk about that, but the affordable housing deferral is hugely helpful if granted. And as it says here, Jim and Carolyn, they walk the walk. They have lived in this residence since 1957. So essentially, this house has been employee housing its entire lifespan, and it will continue to be employee housing in the future. As I said, the next generation will take control of this. And Katie works at the Aspen School District. Her husband, Stuart, is employed by Pickens County as a financial analyst. So they are also longtime locals and local workers. And Nora, their daughter, is here, and she's too young to have a job yet, but we'll talk to her about that after the meeting. So, as everybody knows, the high cost of construction is incredibly high. And the fees that are imposed on top of that really create a lot of hurdles for families like this to stay here. The pull is very strong to just give up and sell out and move down valley or move out of the community. But that's not the choice that the family has made. They have stayed, they've attempted to foster the community as best they can. And I think it's time that we celebrate these longtime locals and give back to give to the community and provide some type of fee waivers and some type of assistance in the overall construction of this project. So here is a breakdown of the estimated fees. You can see that for a duplex for this family, we're looking at only $848,000, almost $850,000 of project fees. That is on top of construction costs and other soft costs for architects and planners such as myself. So with the affordable housing deferral that they meet the criteria for, we are reducing the fees down to $500,000, a little north of $500,000, which is still crazy to consider. And this really does help a lot, but construction and everything else adds up. So then we take a look at the tree mitigation. We have a tree mitigation fee of $120,000. Now, if you look at this, here are the trees that we are proposing to remove. We are trying to keep as many as we possibly can along the street. Those are large spruce trees that were planted by their father. But there are some additional trees that just happen to fall within the area that will be disturbed from construction. But all of these trees were trees that were planted by the family. This is a picture of Carolyn. She looks pretty much the same, I think. Give me the 20 afterwards. But you can see that these are trees that were planted by our father, so you can see the small size of them. Here's a picture of Jim. He took something to the eye. We don't remember what that was, but you see in the back, those are the trees. Those are exactly the trees that we were removing, and they were just small whips back in the early 60s following the planting by their father. And I think this is a really interesting picture. This is a view from Red Butte. So you can see that the large area of trees are the cemetery, and Cemetery Lane would parallel. And our property would be right on the corner right there in the back. So this was a part of Merle Ranch that was still ranched or devoid of trees.
Yeah.
So any trees that have been put in there are additive from what was historically there. So if we can remove the tree mitigation waiver, we would reduce our fees down to $423. I think we're getting a little bit closer to something that's doable, but we're still a pretty high cost on top of everything else. So we can look at, affordable housing. I've mentioned that this house has been affordable housing from its inception and will continue to be, or workforce housing. And you could arguably say that it's an essential public facility. All of these old homes are essential public facilities when you have somebody that's part of the community that really created this place, living there and able to tell the stories. So if we can talk about what those reductions would be of the impact fees, parks, TDM, all of that would help immensely for the family in trying to get this done. So in summation, we have the GMQS local demolition allotment request. We have the affordable housing mitigation deferral. We have the special review for the top of slope. And then the discussion about the long-time local impact fee waivers. What can we do to try to close that gap for our people that have been here so long? So we understand that many people come in and say, I need these fee reductions, and then they turn around the next day and sell the property. That's not going to be the case here. As you saw, the price per square foot is a price per square foot of people that are paying for this and building this for their own use. This is not going to be flipped. So the family does understand, though, that, you know, the city needs to collect fees for the review of everything. We understand that. But if we could find some way to close that gap a little bit, keeping in mind the great contributions that the family has made through the years, that would be wonderful. And I think it's time that we do this, because we are starting to lose the longtime locals, not only through people moving on, but also just, you know, aging. And it's important to try to provide something for the families. We talk about community, but the families, the people who have made this place, are really what that community is. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Haley, or I can answer any questions if you'd like to do that right now, or wait and I'll answer later.
Do council members have any questions?
Did you have anything else?
Sam?
Yeah.
Anything else to say?
I was just wondering if you had any plans to plant more trees in lieu of removing some.
We do. We have that was a landscape plan. There is some limitation about how much we can do, but we do plan on putting back a landscape. And again, maintaining as much as we can, and then judiciously putting some new ones in. We do have the wildfire, you know, hazards. It's difficult to get insurance, but we're going to do as much as we possibly can to offset that.
Cool. Thank you.
Other questions? I was wondering, what will the square footage of the completed structure be?
If I could ask Erica, or, oh, there you guys are. It's 6,200 for both sides.
6,200 square feet. Okay. Thank you. I think we now turn to the staff presentation. Oh, John, you have a question as well?
Yeah, this is a little off topic, but maybe Carolyn or Jim could answer this. The Eli Cerise ditch down in Woody Creek, you're related to those, to Mr. Cerise, right?
Yes.
That's what I thought. So your family's been in town generations, 4 or 5? I just thought I'd point that out because I know a lot of people in this room aren't aware of that, but a lot of, I believe your ancestors came from Val d'Aosta in Italy.
That's correct.
And there were a lot of Italian immigrants in the valley at the time, Tony Wagner's family, and they are responsible for a lot of the irrigated land we have in this valley. So thank you for that.
Thank you. John, appreciate that. Okay, I think it's time for staff presentation. Haley?
Yes, and before I begin, I have received a lot of public comment, so good job. And I think a lot of it's been forwarded to y'all already.
I
but
think it
did
all has.
received one more since I forwarded y'all the last one today, so I printed it off.
I appreciate that you brought printout copies because they have been coming in over the past several weeks.
I printed off 2 copies.
Okay, one for the record and one to go around.
Yeah, the top one is the one that came in before I was able to forward it to y'all, and then the other ones are the ones that came in today that y'all should have seen in your inbox today.
We've been getting them forwarded to us, so
Yeah,
thank you for that.
yeah. So Patrick sort of rolled through this, so I'll try to keep it high level and not repeat anything that Patrick had already gone over. Just a little bit of extra information, though. This is an R30 zone district, so it's a low-density residential lot, just a little bit over 58,000 square feet, so it is quite a large lot. And as Patrick alluded to, there is a single-family residential development existing with the intent to demolish and replace with a duplex. And we already saw this as well, but this is just the lot and then the approximate location to Castle Creek. And this is a combined review to city council, so I just wanted to go through this a little bit because y'all typically don't see things like top of slope and stream margin. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time going through the review criteria and sort of digging in a little bit to the land use code sections. So the first one we'll go through is the longtime local allotment, which does go to city council, and that is why this entire packet is going in front of you, because the applicants requested a combined review. Special review for the top of slope establishment typically goes to P&Z. I know Christine's seen a lot of these over the years. And then the residential mitigation deferral agreement is typically an administrative requirement that is done through APSHA and community development. But again, this is a combined review, and because of the demolition allotment, it's all going in front of you tonight. So starting with the demolition allotment, the applicants are requesting a 2026 longtime local allotment. And council is very well aware of the review criteria, with the review criteria being that the applicants have owned and occupied the residence for 35 years. And to just highlight what Patrick had already gone over, the applicants have owned the property as tenants in common since 1981, subsequent to it being deeded from their father after his purchase and construction of the property in 1956. Staff finds that the documents support ownership and occupancy of the property for a period of 44 years, with the property being owned by the family for 69 years. That staff finds that the applicants meet the criteria for a longtime local demolition allotment. The second component to this presentation tonight is the top of slope for the property, which will be done through special review. This is with our environmentally sensitive area chapter, or ESA chapter, in Title 26. So stream margin states that heightened review is necessary for areas located within 100 feet from the high water line of the Roaring Fork River and its tributary streams, and to all development within the flood hazard area, also known as the 100-year floodplain. So because Castle Creek is a tributary stream of the Roaring Fork River, it's then subject to stream margin. Because this property does not have an existing top of slope, that is what sort of brings it into the special review category, which you're going to be looking at tonight. So when the stream margin map was created for the city of Aspen, the tributary streams were not included. It was just the Roaring Fork River. So it's staff intent, as these properties that are located along Castle Creek come into re-review for development, that we take a look at the properties in order to establish the top of slope and top of slope setback, which is 15 feet. And this is just to ensure that properties that are redeveloping along our waterways are protecting the watercourses, the riparian zones, and the natural features. This is all part of our stream margin review, which again, typically P&Z reviews. So the process for the special review to create the top of slope and the 15-foot setback is for the City of Aspen's engineer staff to go out onto the property, meet up with a surveyor, typically like a representative, like Patrick will be there, and they will discuss the property and look at the on-site conditions to determine where an appropriate top of slope is. And they're all sort of site by site, just to see what is appropriate for each property. And to Patrick's point, this is a unique property in that it's both very long and there is a very steep slope that sort of bifurcates the property. So there's sort of this already natural top of slope on the property. So the city of engineer staff and the surveyor both agreed upon that apparent top of slope, which I highlighted in yellow, which is on the sort of right-hand side, that's meeting the 40% and greater steep slope. And then there's just that 15-foot setback from the top of slope. So this, in a sense, just creates a building envelope for what is allowed to have development on the property to keep it away from the water course. And just for reference too, part of stream margin review, and the top of slope establishment is that no development will be allowed within the top of slope or setback area. So staff finds the proposed top of slope and setback meet the review criteria. There was also not a finding of denial, so that review criteria is not applicable for establishing the top of slope. And then the third request tonight is the GMQS mitigation deferral agreement. And this final request, again, comes out of Growth Management Quota System, or GMQS, and it allows for full-time local working residents to defer affordable housing mitigation, which is generated through development and redevelopment for both residential and non-residential parcels. So GMQS, just as a little bit of a background, because we don't often see this, is just how the city shall calculate affordable housing mitigation, which is done through calculating how many new full-time employees, or FTEs, have been generated through development, and it also accounts for the amount of new developed floor area. And I will say, Patrick sort of ran through an exercise with the numbers. Staff can't speak to any of the numbers for this exact property as we haven't seen the building permits. We typically calculate that as the building permit comes in, and we issue all of those fees, which shall be paid prior to the building permit issuance. So that's usually the timeline that staff does the calculations. And there are many ways to mitigate the generation of FTEs, one of which you'll see after this presentation. This can be done through on-site ADUs, deed restrictions, the Affordable Housing Credits Program, or fee and lieu. And the request to defer the payment of affordable housing mitigation is allowed so long as there is a full-time resident in the home, meaning the affordable housing mitigation would be transferred if the property were to be sold, or if the new owner is not living and working full-time in Aspen. And to Bill's point earlier, the cost does accrue CPI year over year. So what it is sort of, if the agreement is done today, there is the CPI index that accrues, say, 20 years down the road. That's what the affordable housing deferral agreement would cost at that time. So for the case of the applicants, Aspen Snowmass confirmed that they've both worked 10 years prior to their retirement, which is the criteria needed for APSHA to meet the qualifications for the deferral agreement. So staff finds the criteria is met for this agreement. And there's just our affidavit from Aspen Snowmass. And then specifically, the request of the applicants is an indefinite deferral for affordable housing mitigation, in addition to the waiver for the building permit fees and other associated fees and costs to redevelop the property. So I just want to talk through just a little bit about what that would mean and how staff sort of sees this based on the code. So the municipal code does not have a path to waive all costs associated with redevelopment. What the municipal code does allow for is a deed-restricted property to waive all affordable housing mitigation and building permit fees. So staff in the memo recommended that applicants considered a resident-occupied or RO deed restriction, which would allow for many of the fees to be waived, as well as for the generation of the certificates of affordable housing credits. So on this next slide is just an example of what Title II and Title 26 allow for building permit fee and affordable housing mitigation fees to be waived through doing a deed restriction. These fees are, things such as the building, engineers, parks, which also could include the tree removal, zoning, Aspen Energy Code. So there's quite a slew of sort of these mitigations that would not need to be paid if the property were to be 100% deed restricted. And staff recommends this route to the applicants because there is a route that is clear within the municipal code at this time. So unfortunately, there is no criteria or precedent set for additional fees to be waived in this scenario. For this redevelopment, the fees on this slide would not be waived. So these fees do not have a path within the municipal code to be waived due to a few different factors that are a little bit different from the fees in the previous slide, which the city and staff sees as bringing a community benefit because it's serving housing at an affordable rate. These ones are a little bit different. So for instance, the utility tap fee are for any additional taps that would be different between what was paid before and what taps cost today. And these fees are for finite resources such as electricity and water. And staff finds that it does not benefit the community to push these costs to other ratepayers through a waiver. Next, the city doesn't have any jurisdiction over a few fees such as the sanitation district fees or the county use tax deposits. And then additionally, the impact fees, which are set within Title 26 of the Land Use Code. The city sees these as the dedication of parklands, transportation demand management, or TDM, and school lands. And the city sees these impacts fees as a way to mitigate the externalities created by redevelopment, and they serve community programs and interests that the city has found that all should contribute towards. So such examples are capital improvements that support multimodal solutions, air quality, new parks, lands, and recreation facilities, and land dedicated to the Aspen School District. So staff is a bit hesitant to set precedent for waiving some of these fees without clear criteria or a path within the municipal code, which is where our recommendation has come from. We do have two conditions of approval, which are set forth in the resolution as is tonight. Both of these are from sort of the top of slope and special review view, one of which is just ensuring that all the utilities and the plan sets that are going forth for the building permit are showing appropriate utilities and sort of any easements, such as the water, that are on site. And then the second is just a generalized top of slope condition that we put for most sort of stream margin top of slope reviews, ensuring that no development's permitted and that anything that's removed may only be revegetated with native vegetation. So staff recommends approval of Resolution 72, Series of 2025. It's written in the approval of the three requests, which again is the longtime local demolition allotment, the top of slope special review as stated in the stream margin review, and then the third is the affordable housing deferral mitigation agreement.
Thank you. Are there any, Bill?
Thanks, Haley.
Questions?
And thanks, Patrick. Haley, first question is, you mentioned when you were talking about the deferral agreement that the way that it works is that it accrues sort of additional costs based on CPI increases on an
It
annual
compounds.
basis. Am I mistaken? I thought that the way that it worked is that you, at the time of sale, or I should say specifically sale to a non-qualified local, that you paid the rate in effect at that point in time, not the original rate escalated.
I think
But I
it's
could
the
be mistaken.
original rate compounded by annual CPI.
If I could comment, for the record, Ben Anderson, Community Development Director. During the moratorium conversation, as we were changing mitigation requirements related to single-family and duplex redevelopment, Mike Maple, who had a lot of comments about that, raised exactly the question about the uncertainty that this deferral, as it was previously in the code, it was exactly as you described, where it was uncertain what that deferral agreement was going to cost 20 years down the road. And there was total agreement from us. And so we changed the code to establish it as a fee in lieu number at the time of building permit, based on the code at the time of building permit, and then it accrues as by CPI. So it's a little bit more predictable. Who knows what happens with inflation, but it's more predictable than it was previously.
Thank you for clarifying that, and I guess that negates the need for further discussion on my comments earlier tonight. I didn't realize that change had been made, so apologies. that's news to me, but that's a good change. Question 2. Patrick, has the applicant contemplated RO designation?
The RO designation offer was first made to us in the staff memo, which came out last week. We'd had some discussions previous, but it had not come up. We've briefly talked about it. I think the initial reaction is that it's another encumbrance on the property when one doesn't exist currently today. And I think the other uncertainty is, and Haley and Ben can opine on this, but, you know, RO deed restrictions, I believe, are drafted on a case-by-case basis. So what that actual deed restriction looks like. We have reviewed the parameters of an RO deed restriction with no cap and talked about the maximum assets, which can be varied, I believe, by the deed restriction. And other, you know, for sale. So we've talked about the rudiments of it, but we haven't really gotten too deep into it. But I think the initial response would be, we don't want to encumber a house that was built by their father and has been in the family and intends to stay in the family moving forward.
Sure, understood, thanks. Lastly, just some thoughts is, you know, I wanted to share with the applicant that I'm sorry you have to come here and ask for permission to tear down a house that your family built. I just think that's a horrible regulation that has been put on private landowners in this community, and I really look forward to a day where it goes away, because it's not fair for you to be here and so many members of your family and your community to be here. So from my seat, I'm sorry. I'm also appreciative that, Patrick, you've shared with us some of what it costs to create livable housing today in Aspen. You know, I live and breathe this on a daily basis, but a lot of other people in this community do not. And I hope that it's somewhat shocking to others on what these numbers are. It's, you know, the affordable housing challenges in our community are partly caused by our community, and you illustrated that well tonight.
Bill, we really need to do public comment first before we all go into our own comments on the application itself.
Okay, I'm happy to revisit later. Thanks.
Thank you. But any other questions?
No other questions at the moment, thanks.
Okay.
I have 2 questions. I've seen a few of these already. How many long-time demo allotments have been given?
I think this would be 33. I think
Or
we just. did-
total, that's total.
Oh,
allotments.
longtime locals, sorry. 6, 8, this would be 10, yeah.
I think this would be 10.
Yeah. Yeah, because we gave one 2 weeks ago, yeah.
Essentially 23 through 26.
2 each year.
And then if you reach the limit in 2026, which we're nearing already, do we move to 2027?
There's the opportunity to do to apply for a future year allotment.
Okay.
And for everyone. So whether or not you're a longtime local, there's the opportunity to do that.
I just want to clarify in the code, I think you're allowed 2 a year to take from additional years. So this would be your second this year. Haley is right, however, there are other paths to get additional multi-year allotments, but they would fall outside of your local allotment authority, if that makes sense.
If I could add one extra bit of context is, on your mid-range calendar, we have scheduled a demolition allotment discussion to happen in July.
Thank you. And then the deferral, the affordable housing mitigation deferral doesn't stipulate if that defers to the seller or the buyer. I mean, there's probably a natural party there, but it doesn't say.
It defers to, I think it defers to the buyer so long as they are not a longtime local worker for the Pickens County. So if they were to sell to somebody who meets that criteria, then it would continue to be deferred.
Thank you.
And that typically happens at title settlement.
Yeah, so it would be deeded and run with the property.
John, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry. If you want me to go now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering, going back to your slide, what the cost reduction was. And I'm going to say if it was listed as an RO, because you gave some examples, Patrick, and I was curious if you know the cost reduction, if it was an RO.
I think it's kind of your slide where it was not covered. The impact fees that I was discussing, I don't think are covered in the RO. I think if we could go back to that slide, there we go.
That's correct.
So those do not have a path, and those are largely the fees that I was pointing out to be removed. However, the tree mitigation is covered by an RO designation, and I'm not sure if that's 100% waiver, but I believe that would be the one outstanding item. So I honed in on the impact fees under employee, and then it would be the tree mitigation.
Sorry, Haley, can you go back one more slide to what would be waived?
And I did confirm with our Parks Department that tree removal would be covered in a 100% deed restriction case.
So, try to get more clear. You showed $850,000 in fees, and I'm just curious what amount would be reduced from that number from this list?
Yeah, so, if you go, please go back to that estimated fee table. Try to remember those various fees in your, there we go. So the fees at the top are all permit review fees, largely. Then in the middle of the,
Let me make it bigger.
in the middle is the impact fees, which is the school land dedication, the housing fee in lieu, which would be handled by a deferral, the parks, the TDM, and the parking. So what is excluded or included in mine is the tree mitigation estimate of 120,000.
So,
Does that help, Sam?
yeah, it doesn't sound like it drops it more than $150,000 at most from that list.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Because you talked about the staff reviews on the top half would all be, all those ones in black
That's correct.
would be dropped.
And those would be dry, yes.
Those would-
Including building permit fee, building plan
Yeah,
review.
all those in the top half.
Okay, so
Under an
still a pretty, so that is a relatively significant amount.
Of reduction.
That's looking at about 76,000, yes, 77,000.
Well, that's just one, but
No, I
then.
mean,
you
it
have
looks
all
like-
those
That's,
ones.
excuse me, yes, no, actually.
It's all of this.
It's all of that, so it's probably a couple $100,000 there,
Except for the use tax.
except for the use tax, which the county collects,
And the city.
In the city.
and the city.
Just for clarity, I will say that the code expressly states that the city cannot waive or reduce fees collected on behalf of separate government agencies. That's because it's not for us. So the school dedication fees, the sanitation department, those are all things you have no power to waive. That's outside of your powers. The taxes are also outside of your powers, as those are established by ordinance, and those are by code. You're not allowed to waive those. The development and building review fees are all, may be waived, and there is language in the code that allows it. I just wanted to make that clear while you're thinking about this.
One more question for you, Patrick and team. So staff has proposed an RO designation. You've said that's not something you'd want to do, and I completely understand that. So where does that leave you as far as, do you have other than the argument you already made, do you have anything more you'd want to say about what you think might be a good compromise, or are you really just sitting here hoping for the reduction of fees, if that's a fair question?
Well, I'm looking for the reduction of fees. RO is a new concept, as I said, so I think we'd have to mull that over, and it would be due at building permit. So I don't know if that gives us time to review what that actual deed restriction would look like. What I was trying to do is give some type of, something to hang your hat on, and some concrete forms. So you have the deferral, which is one thing that's, this residence has been an employee housing and will remain, so that there seems to be a nexus between that. The tree mitigation was another aspect that there seemed to be a clear nexus connection. So that's what I was looking at. Of course, the amount of fees that are charged, I think, wholly are somewhat egregious for a longtime local to try to shoulder. So looking at some type of reduction, any way we can make it.
Yeah. And I just want to say some initial thoughts, not getting too deep, but like things that like,
We do have a public hearing
know.
coming up. so-
no, but like to lead into a question.
Okay, to lead
Yeah.
into a question.
Yeah, that it does seem, initial thoughts, that a lot of these fees are anti-local in a sense of what it means to be able to afford to live here, especially that it's not 1950 anymore. And these are the things that you're up against, to have generations be able to stay here and to have to, go into the APSHA system to be able to, seems rather unfair to me. And with that, I wanted to ask staff, has this ever been asked before, as far as, is there any precedent for reduction of fees like what they're asking for?
No, Ben and I discussed this earlier, and we both said that since we've been at the city, we've never seen a request for reduction of fees.
And I think just a further response, there's not a world where $850,000 isn't a significant sum of money. And so I want to acknowledge that, and I'm not suggesting it's not an obstacle for folks. I will also just say that, as ComDev is setting our fees, as we're thinking about, and it's not just community development, it's engineering, it's utilities, it's, these other folks that are using the development process to establish the costs that are associated with development that are incurred by the city and other entities in our local community. I think we struggle with this question. We're certainly going to be looking at fee reductions. Where we do get asked for fee reductions is from existing affordable housing projects. So we have had that question for folks that are doing remodels or upgrades to existing affordable housing units. But we have not had this question. And I will say that as staff thinks about this request, one of the things that we struggle with is that while $850,000 is a lot of money, based on the size of the house, based on the location of this place, conservatively, this is a $13 million house when it's done, based on a conservative understanding of price per square in the city of Aspen. So I'm not suggesting that $850,000 is a lot when you're thinking about redevelopment. Certainly for folks that are trying to stay here, find a house, find a place for their family, find a place for future generations. Like, we understand the request, certainly. But without the kinds of things like the deferral agreement sort of includes, where we have some protections for that money eventually finding its way to cover the affordable housing mitigation impacts of a project like this. Without that, and family story is compelling, all of that's very understandable. We don't have any protections for the community if this were not to translate into family housing moving forward. And so that's, I think, where staff lands on this set of questions.
Yeah, so the last question I had, because it makes it sound like someone would become pretty house rich, but potentially cash poor, which is like the tough thing with this, was wondering, since there is no precedent, and if this council wanted to do something about it, I was wondering if there's something we could do covenant-wise where we don't designate RO, but we say, if your family lives there for X number of years, this will be, you won't need to pay this, but if you sell it, within X number of years, then it'll be come back. So instead of having to go through APSHA, sort of coming up with our own new covenant to allow for a situation like this, where I expect them to honor this for decades, where it just doesn't become an issue anymore without actually having to make them APSHA RO.
Yeah, we have a program that has a similar outcome related to small lodge preservation, where if a designated small lodge goes through a renovation, a redevelopment, et cetera, we will waive permit fees. Not this entire list, but a portion of this list. with an agreement that's associated with it, that the lodge operator agrees for it to operate as a lodge, depending on the amount of the waiver. There is an agreement that, I think for 20 years is the duration of that agreement, that allows the waiver as long as that remains a lodge for 20 years.
Yeah.
We
And
have a similar program related to lodge.
just going to say potentially something to work for in this situation. I don't know how that happens, so I'll leave it at that, but that's more or less the idea that I would want to head towards, potentially.
You have a further question?
I do, yeah. Piggybacking on Sam's questions, I'd like to offer maybe an alternative path there for staff and the applicant to consider, which is, would deferment of the fees that we are able to influence be of interest, similar to the program that was described for the housing deferment? You know, if you're not interested in pursuing RO, which again, I understand that, there still offers sort of protection to the community of this not being local housing. And so at the time, if the applicants choose for it to sell it and it's no longer local housing, then those fees would be due at that point in time, escalated by CPI.
I think we're
is that
starting
an
to
avenue?
negotiate different ideas here, and
Rather
I just want to really be cautious here. I was holding off on some of my own comments. I think it's very important that the actions of the council don't become arbitrary and capricious, because there is a very compelling story, an impeccable story of long-term locals. But at what point does the argument become, is 25 years long-term enough? Or is the new home people going to become new long-time locals, or they're not? But the city would need to take a large role as a banker, essentially, for multiple, maybe dozens, if not hundreds of projects of deferred fees going forward. And sometimes it's very hard to track those with the title when something sells and resells and assure that that's there. I just want to come back to kind of a base philosophy that has always been within the city and the county of development pays its own way. And what we would kind of be asking is that the city become a banker to carry the cost until such a time as there is a transfer out of any sort of affordable or resident local use to not use. And I could see us allocating the entire general fund or all the money that would be there to ever develop the armory to covering the cost of the ComDev and the utility department and the water department and all these departments having to carry a debt that will be due someday, maybe. You know, that's the real issue here. It's not how compelling this issue is for this family, in which I have a great deal of sympathy and empathy for. And I literally asked some of those questions myself earlier in the day. But I think we do need to bear in mind that the city has a finite capacity to just fund, and traditionally, community development and all those departments have been a fee-based service. And if we're going to start saying, okay, that's not the case anymore, we would like to, you know, pay for it out of the general fund or whatever taxes that we're collecting, then that really would put a lot of the other projects we've all talked about on hold. And maybe that's where you want to go with it. But I think that those are very important elements of this. And I personally was on council serving with Mayor Clanderud quite a while ago when the Limelight Lodge came through for its redevelopment. And that was a family-owned business. And it served our community for decades as a great lodge. And they presented how they weren't going to be doing food service all day long, and it was going to stay in a 3-star category. It'd never go up to an expensive 4 or 5 car category, and they got a certain amount of, you know, grace and waivers, and we're not going to ask this and that. based on the story. And unfortunately, they hit hard economic times almost immediately thereafter, and they had to sell the project. And they, you know, as you may recall, things like the Deep Powder Lodge and the whole Aspen Manor Lodge all became free market condominiums to pay to keep this lodge a lodge that was affordable, and now it is not. And those giveaways of the free market condo growth were the price that the community paid. So really what they're telling us their intention is that it's going to be generation after generation of the same family living in this project. I'm not sure what detriment entirely is in there in the free market when a family wants to move to Aspen and buy a 6,200 square foot duplex and find it to be because it's going to be my residence. Is that different from market valuation than someone, oh, it's going to only be my second home? I simply don't know, but I think that deserves a little more depth of look into that as we go forward and as the applicant thinks about it. The only question I really had for you going into questions is, has condominiumization of the duplex been considered? And will it be one home or is it actually two homes?
But no, I believe that condominiumization has been considered, and it would be just to be able to understand and operate the duplex moving forward, it would be essential to have that.
So it would be essential to literally be two homes
Be
in
two
a
homes.
duplex configuration.
Well, yes, they would be 2 units of a condo.
Okay, and that's why I had thought, I wonder if they're interested in deed restricting to RO1 of the halves of the duplex or anything like that, as a way to try to avoid the fees or to defer the fees. It was just a thought to see if you'd had discussed that
Our
aspect.
understanding, for instance, the deferral would be per unit, is what I understand. So there's always been an understanding. So I don't know if you deed restrict one unit as RO, does the entire development get the benefit? So that's a question to, that remains. And I think an RO deed restriction, as I said, is drafted specific to the property. So, we'd have to see what that would look like. But if I could go back just to answer some of your questions, I mean, I think you got to look at the pool of the population of the people that could meet this. And I wholly agree that, as I provided in the presentation, they don't want a free lunch. We understand that there are fees that need to be paid.
I understand
And-
the position.
Right.
I mean, I just have raised questions myself. I don't really,
But the fee, and I understand the difficulty of where do you cut it off at a long-time local? I mean, 69 years or, whatever it might be. But the sheer population, the sheer pool of the people that are going to be acting upon this is getting smaller by the day. So it's not a wholesale, broad waiver that you're giving. It's a very, knowable, finite percentage of the population that this could apply to, and it can be governed by how you set those rules up. As Ben was saying, long-time lodging has parameters, so too can this program have parameters that can be, it's not willy-nilly, that has been knowable, and everybody would play by those.
thank you.
Thank you.
Were there other questions for staff or the applicant before we open the public hearing? Or any comments from, okay, thank you. We will now move to the public hearing portion of the meeting. I think we have a lot of people here for this. And I will simply ask you your name as you speak, and we have a 3-minute timer. If others have made the comments you'd like to make, you can feel free to endorse those comments as well as add your own. So who would like to go first? Okay, Tony and then John.
Beauty before age.
Better sit
I'll
down, too.
hold the chair for you, John.
We can sit there together.
I'm John Kelleher, and I just wanted to say I support everything that Patrick's talked about. This Cerise has been a longtime friend. I've seen the trees. Too many trees are trying to be cut down because they spoil the views. But yes, I think that out at the lumberyard, you're going to plant all sorts of trees there, and that I've planted 50 trees around my house, which didn't have a tree at all when I built it. So anyway, God bless you, and thanks very much for your questions, and go get them. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
And I support the Cerises.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Good job.
And Tony Wagner.
Not in the same way, but yeah.
All right.
Tony Wagner's my name.
Hey, Tony.
I was just a young boy when those two kids were born down the road from me in Woody Creek. So I can vouch for they've been around a long time. I mean, if you look at my face, you know I'm telling the truth. But I worked with Jimmy on this Aspen Mountain Ski Patrol. And Carolyn was my boss when I served as an ambassador on Aspen Mountain. And I want to tell you one thing. If you're going to ski with Carolyn, don't make too many turns or she'll run right up your back. And so I'm 100% in giving them every break you can, because they certainly deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I got one.
Please, Pat.
I don't know if I'm going to be quite as brief because I'm not as cool as Tony Wagner. My name is Pat Bingham, and I grew up with Aspen and the Cerise kids. And I'm here today to show my support for them and the generations to come. You know, these are the kind of people we don't want to lose in this community. And we already heard about how they were born in Woody Creek, moved to the neighborhood 70 years ago. Carolyn raised her own family on the property. She lived with her mother and father and Jimmy, all in the same house all these years. I think they paid their dues in terms of employee housing. They all were employees, and I think they've more than paid their dues in that regard. And this doesn't happen every day in Aspen. I don't think these kinds of requests are going to happen much at all. Most of the people who buy real estate here have very little history in the community, and they want to immediately tear down what they bought and create a mansion in its place. And then the mansion stays there empty most of the time. The permits that these guys are facing are approaching $1 million. That just doesn't seem right. They don't want to leave. This family doesn't want to leave. And if you look around the room this evening, you can see that the community doesn't want them to leave either. The community has a way of wrapping its arms around people. It wrapped its arms around my own family about 30 years ago when we faced a potential real estate crisis around a fence line. We had to step outside the normal way of resolving things, and we prevailed. And I'm hoping that the city of Aspen will step outside of the normal way of resolving things and look for ways to make it a little easier for the Cerise family to build their future family home. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. Additional public comments, come on up.
I'm Donna Rollins, and I live Canna Corner to the Cerises. I'm sort of an old-time local. I came here in '67, bought my house in 1970, and I am for the good old days. I have 3 generations of women living in my house. My daughter, my granddaughter, and my granddaughter's husband. And that's what they want. They want the way we used to be in the olden days, where the families were all together, you had aunts, uncles. It's so simple, and they're such good neighbors. I mean, Leo, we walk the ditch. The rich people that are surrounding us, they don't clear the ditches. So Leo and I walk the ditch, and we clear it all out so we can get our water down. But please, you know, I'm house rich and cash poor, but I'm not about to sell my house and go anywhere. Been there since 1970. My family is with me, and it's a wonderful way to live and to just be a part of the community. Plus, they do a lot of volunteer work. I mean, we can't lose them. They're my neighbors. I can't lose them. Please, let them stay. Thank you.
Thank you.
do not like speaking in public. Carolyn was my...
Your name?
Oh, Anita Rayburn.
Thank you.
Living in the house that I was born in Woody Creek. And Carolyn was my father's assistant manager at Buttermilk when he was the Buttermilk Mountain manager for a long time. And this is recording, weird. So I can attest also to what an excellent family they are and how much they have given to the community. And one of the reasons that you should grant their request is that what they are proposing to do is to improve a property that is falling, not into disrepair, but, something less dramatic than that. But it's aging, and this will improve it, and it will cut down on wildfire risk. The house that they are proposing will be a safer place, and it will be a safer place for locals to live and continue to give to the community. And I just want to second what she said about how much volunteer work they do and have done and will continue to do. And that what they are doing is asking permission, which, unlike all of my neighbors, is different than asking forgiveness afterwards, where I have seen time and time and time and time and time again houses being built, ginormous fences being built, walls being built, garages being built, and all that happens is they get fined, and then they sell the property for several $1 million more than the fine cost them. And so I think just based on basic fairness that you need to grant them this request because they are true locals and good and decent people who are giving to this community, unlike the many people who do the other way of building, which is just to do it and say, oh, sure, we'll pay the fine. It costs us nothing. Thank you.
Name's Stoney Davis. To address your question, Rachel, about the flood of applicants that may come in if you allow this one, I know of Donna Rowland is one. She could apply. Jack Reese is another that could apply that's been here for 60 years. But other than that, you may have, that I don't know about, another 5 or 6, but it's not going to be the 100 that you're going to become the banker for. So the rest of the city departments will have to be shut down or something for them.
Yeah, Stoney, I appreciate that. I just like to make sure something is looked at from 360 degrees, and I think the next council following us will hear how it should be done for people who've been here 40 years, and after that, it'll be 30 years, because we're all community-serving members, and so it becomes a slippery slope. That's all my point was, but I do appreciate that there's not as many who have the legacy and the impeccable resume that we've had presented here tonight. Additional public comments? Stefan.
This is hard for me, as this is a great family.
And just give us your name for the record.
Stefan Reveal. I just would like to endorse this as they are a great family. Katie is my daughter's teacher. And we really need to take care of these families. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Way in the back.
I'm Kathy DeWolf. I've been reading in the paper that the city of Aspen is about to spend $500 million to $750 million on the lumber yard, which we all, I think, agree is needed. So that's $500 million. That's almost $750 million for employee housing. And it's much needed in this community. But in light of the critical need for employee housing, it would behoove the council to do whatever they can to make it easy for this family to redevelop their property, and especially in giving them some relief from paying the substantial impact fees, such as the employee mitigation fees. the council grants variances from time to time for special circumstances. And these, Rachel, you were saying it's so hard to quantify. What is 40 years, 50 years, 60 years? Well, how about starting with taking people who were born here? Narrow it in. That's going to be a real tight category. I don't think you'll have too many problems if that's your initial criteria. So to me, I would just tighten that up. And then I don't think you're going to have hundreds of people. And the alternative is, would you rather have this family and their grandchildren, their children and grandchildren, be in the lumberyard when they've already got something that's great and precious and that they take care of and everybody loves them? And it's just, to me, it's a more unique situation than just taking care of people who've lived here for a long time. This is, not that we shouldn't do that, but this is really unique to have people who've been born here try to do this. And I bet there's not more than 4 or 5 other people that would come before you with this request. So I think you should help them out if you can. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. In the back.
I'm Lorna Peterson, and I was born and raised here. And I support the Cereses. My late husband, Bert, happened to have the wherewithal to buy a open market condo. And when he died, that was it's how I'm living. And most of his friends did not, and they're struggling. The Cereses need to keep their house and keep it for them and their family.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Come on down.
Good evening. I'm Rob Guile. I was in this chair about 3 years ago, and I think John was the only one left over from that. And I was applying for the same thing the Cereses were, except on a smaller scale, of putting in a basement apartment for my son. And my whole argument was that we are supplying the employee housing on our own properties for our own kids, instead of you all spending whatever the price is for employee housing unit. And, with that, we should get some sort of benefit to ourselves instead of selling it and somebody else buying it and then not living here. We're trying to keep a compound or a family legacy going. But the only way to do it is to get some concessions. And I think a fair concession is not that you're keeping those employees, i.e. the kids, out of the employee housing pool. So I support them.
Thank you. I saw Ruth come in. I think she wants to say something. We're in public comment now. Is anybody else here to say anything on? Okay, Ducky.
She called me Ducky. Deborah.
Deborah.
If you want it for the record. Deborah. Knowlton Coombe. I was born and raised here, as well as my good friends, the Cereses. And I would like to just encourage you to go with all of what Patrick had said and go with all the necessities that they need to be able to stay here in this community, because they are the community. They make the face of this community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Ruth.
Ruth Harrison, in case you didn't know. Besides the fact of what the Cereses are asking for, or the Barabys, they are just wonderful, wonderful human beings, over the top. And it just breaks my heart that the people have lived here their whole lives, and not only that, but now their daughter lives here, their granddaughter. The Cerise family has been here, I don't know, maybe 3 generations worth. And, they should be able to do this without going bankrupt. You know, the mitigation, however that is, I heard it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I see absolutely no point in it, none. They should be able to move in and do what they have to do and pay for whatever is necessary. Adding extra fees on top of just doing a remodel or, you know, splitting the lot, whatever they want to do, they should be able to do it without losing all the money that they've earned. They've been here, employee housing, the family, they just deserve better. They have been here for generations. And I have a hard time with them having to lose every dollar they have to make this work. It should not be that hard. There's no point in it. It's just ridiculous. You know, the second, third homeowners that come in here, they have the money to do that, you know, so they should pay for that. But the families who have been born and raised here and want to do something really positive for the community to keep them in the valley, to keep them in Aspen instead of moving down valley like everybody is, they should be given, you guys should bend over backwards to help them.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Additional comments? Come on down.
I'll be brief.
Wait till you're at the microphone for the record. I'm sorry.
I'll be real quick. I've been in the community.
And what's your name?
Sure, Andrew Roberts. I've been in the community for about 9 years and am trying to establish myself as a local. I am a local developer, at least trying to be. And, you know, when people purchase a property like these guys did back in the day with an inalienable bundle of rights, you have a bundle of rights with your property when you buy something that is not supposed to be taken away from you. And I find it, you know, a little bit disturbing that over time, governments and cities find ways to maybe not impede on that bundle of rights, but they do so in a way that's related to fees. I came to this game fully expecting to pay every penny of the game I play in this town, and I think it's people like me that bring additional funds to this town so that people like this can get a break. So I totally support, as a developer and somebody that pays a lot of money in this town to do what we do, a break for people like this family. So that's just my only comment.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Come on down.
Hi, I'm Killeen Bretman, and I live in downtown Aspen. I'm one of the fortunate that is in an RO, and very appreciative of that. And I think you all need to really think about the code. If the only way staff can try to come up with a solution is an RO designation, you know, the RO is not a perfect system. As I said, I'm so happy to be there, but you know, I think whether you're in free market or you have a condo and you want to, you know, replace a fireplace or do a big demo like this, the fees are astronomical and they're crazy. And I think it would be great if you could all use this project as an opportunity to come up with something really creative. So the rest of us, when we come, you know, before you or want to do, whether it's a small or a large remodel, that there is an alternative. It's not just one or the other. And I think the Teresa's are amazing, and we should do whatever we can to help them. Thanks.
Thank you, Colleen. There have to be a few more hiding back there. Anybody else ready to make a comment? Okay. Thank you.
Patty Spilsbury, and I'm not a public speaker, but I just want to say I've known the Teresa's for over 40 years. We've worked together. They're awesome, and I love them. And I say ditto to everyone that's been up here. And I just like, we just need to take care of each other.
Thank you. I see one more in the audience, and I do see some people online. We'll get to you in just a few minutes after the room.
Hi there, I'm Rosa Bello, and I really encourage you all to be creative and do what you can to help this family out. I do think. I've known them since the 1900s when I first moved here, but my 1900s and their 1900s are years and years apart. But I think they are such valuable assets in our community, and I would hate to see this property be just free market because the economics beg that. So I hope that you all can help them so that they can keep it as a local family compound. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else here in the room? Okay, we will go to those online. I see Mike Maple is there for a comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Mike Maple. First of all, I want to say I want to support this application, although there are some modifications that I think are in order. First and foremost, the whole idea of having to apply for a demolition allotment is a completely broken and absurd system that is detrimental to our community, creating undue stress and expense for people to proceed with the rights that they should have to utilize their property as permitted by code. So I urge you to grant this allotment. In granting this allotment, you will of course create greater stress for all those that follow, since you're borrowing from the future. This demolition allotment program absolutely needs to be eliminated as soon as possible, as it's causing tremendous detriment to our community. Secondly, with respect to fees, and specifically employee housing fees, the Cereses have paid it forward. They housed at no cost to the community many FTEs for decades and decades and decades. And to suggest that their contribution to the community housing problem is of no value is absurd. I have attempted to make a presentation to staff about the absurdity of charging locals for employee housing mitigation when they have been already mitigating for years or decades, and it hasn't gotten much traction. But you don't charge employee housing mitigation fees for employee housing units. This is an employee housing unit. It just happens to be a free market employee housing unit. That doesn't mean it has not mitigated housing for the local community workforce for decades and decades and decades. And if the Cereses are able and willing to continue to work, they will, of course, be providing their own employee housing. So I would urge you to not defer the employee housing requirements, but to recognize that they have already provided employee housing to the community for decades and decades and decades, and therefore it is completely appropriate to eliminate any employee housing mitigation fees in total. It's easy to do the math to figure out the number of FTEs that they have already provided in the way of employee housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate your comments. And what was the date we have for the demolition permit? July 14th is set for a work session. We anticipate seeing you there and having a really good discussion on how this program may be improved or where changes need to go. Anyone else no one else has their hand up on the online to speak unless iPad 1759 wants to speak. Or number one, which is up there. Okay. Is there anyone else? This will be the last call, and then I'll close the public hearing. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the council table. Appreciate the great turnout of individuals who came to speak to us. I would want to put it on the record for myself that I first met Carolyn and Leo at the Leave It to Leo buttermilk ski rental shop, probably in the mid-'80s, as I was delivering their brochures and others for the ski industry in the winter. And so there's no question about, as I said, impeccable resume and fantastic people that this issue is coming before us with. There are a lot of different issues on the table, but let me try to sort a few out. We seem to have no issue with the stream margin review and setting the stream margin area. That is something of total agreement with the staff. It seems that there is no discussion or problem related to the house design, the square footage, what's allowed on the lot, everything like that. Where we come down to are the questions of, and there's no question on the demolition allotment for a long-time local. That has been very clearly demonstrated, the full qualifications. Thank you both for coming again. And so the issues it really comes down to are the fees, which there's been some very creative suggestions offered by members of the public and at this table. I do want to point out that, you know, some of those, as I said, or our staff has said, we can't waive whether they want to hook the house up to the sewer system, that's up to the sanitation district to say that they'd like to let that go. And we have an information memo that's been out there, but we are currently looking at a request from the school district to renew the 0.30 cent sales tax that they currently have and actually double it to add on another 0.30 cent sales tax, as well as them going this fall for a mill levy override on their property taxes, because the school district is in pretty short shape with a declining enrollment and the state school finance bill cutback that really hurt high-cost areas. So, you know, we're looking as a community at should or shouldn't we actually fund our schools appropriately going forward for all the programs they had. There's a lot of those fees which are genuine in there that we have little to no control over. I do need to point out that one of the goals that people have offered as, you know, a priority is to buy expiring deed restrictions, that when some of these affordable housing units were made a long time ago, they would go free market at a certain point in time. And that's been a priority to try to buy those to preserve that. And I think that what you hear with the deferral agreement is similar to the same, of saying this has been affordable housing, as everyone has said, a lot of workers there, a lot of FTEs. Let's see it continue that way, so this could be deferred in perpetuity unless and until the property goes to a free market second home, non-working type of family. So I see a real parallel there with the community saying, don't let the deed restrictions expire at Centennial or other scattered site areas across the town, and whether this continues to serve this function that deserves the waivers going forward. Because I would like to see this family and multiple generations here forever, you know, in perpetuity. But there's really very hard to guarantee the future that way, that the family may or may not make, or the grandchildren or great-grandchildren make a different decision, and it becomes a 6,200 square foot free market beautiful home for a second homeowner. And that is what we have to always wrestle with at the council. It's not what we're seeing here and now today or the character of the applicant. It is, where is this community in another 30 years? Where is it in another 40 years? So with those comments, I will turn it back to the table to have some discussions. I think I've heard from one end, like to see full fee removal of every fee we can, or just well, you had started your comments with you thought it was wrong to have any of these development fees.
I also didn't say that.
Okay. Well, please let me hear some comments on what, where the argument, where the discussion's going, and anyone is welcome if you feel brave enough to jump in.
I'm happy to go first.
Okay.
Thank you all for your comments tonight. This is quite a group to get together for in person and on email. We've heard from a lot of people in the community about this, and it's hard because we don't want it to be hard for local residents, especially the people who built this community. I'm sympathetic to the fees and the fee structure. They are a lot partially because there's a lot of money to be made off of redevelopment in Aspen. I think the code tries to acknowledge this, as Haley alluded to, by offering a deed restriction to forego that potential payoff in the future. If this was a one-time ask, I'd be in favor. I'm hesitant to support and setting a precedent as a council to become a jury of who is more local and more deserving of waiving fees into the future. I'm concerned about the unintended consequences of simply waiving fees here tonight based on emotion. But I would like to find a creative solution to make this work, because I agree with everything that's been said here tonight, and we want to keep families like this in Aspen.
Very good. John?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say, wow, that was, you said what I wanted to say, except way better. And I'm struggling with this too, because I've known this family for decades, and I know what their ancestors and they have done for our community. It's irreplaceable. But I also agree with setting a precedent and being a jury every time a really awesome story comes in here, because we're supposed to separate stories from what's really in front of us. I guess my question is, the resident occupied designation seems to be the most simplest path forward in the way I'm looking at it right now. Do you need time to look that over before we think that over, before we take this any farther?
You know, I am sitting here thinking about resident occupied as it's come forward in the past. In many ways, it was thought of as a way to keep longer-term locals here in the community. And in another way, that it made a developer of multiplexes of affordable housing break even. It would make the pro forma work to have some RO, much more expensive units in. And so that is really kind of the genesis of where there's been more one-offs on the deed restrictions. When John McBride proposed his property at the Airport Business Center to be RO, or when Tim Semrau created the Little Vic's. And, you know, I think they do take time to work through that. I'm not sure that APCHA has had a standard deed restriction, because a lot of it has been developed through the private sector. And this would obviously be a private sector development. I would love to see this potentially continue, to both have a chance to think about ways to work through issues like that, and be able to see if there's a way that this could be acceptable to the family, in that, again, if circumstances change for whatever reasons, and life gets unpredictable when you look 20 and 30 miles down, years down the road, what would be a way that that they could remove the RO restriction to be able to sell free market, to then pay the fees or something like that? I mean, that's a sequence of events, but I think that that's not something we create at the fly on the table. And it would be precedent setting, and there's no question about that. I appreciate Kathy DeWolf's concept that you have to be born here to apply for that, but that's the type of thing that leads to lawsuits, where someone's like, well, they moved me here when I was only 2. And you know, you end up with lawsuits about, are you being arbitrary and capricious in how you're applying the law, and what is fair, and maybe the definition of fair changes over time for some people, or some communities. And many of these things are fees, the use taxes and stuff that I think were not just code, they were voted on. They were voted on by the public to put these in place. And so I don't want to, you know, you are turning around at some level and saying, that's okay, everybody else who gets a tap fee in the future will pay for this. and everybody else with their water rates will subsidize this. And if it really was just 4 or 5 off, maybe that's something that's really acceptable, but maybe it ends up being a lot more than that. So I appreciate those comments coming from you guys, and I don't know if you've had a chance to absorb kind of a little of what's being said and offer your own comments to where you think this should go. Sam?
No, with pleasure. I think this is a precedent worth setting, because I think it is different. This is free market, and we have the opportunity here to follow the spirit of RO without instituting RO. And I don't think they're asking for every fee to be waived, but for ones that we can handle, absorb, and I think there is a precedent that Ben said that's related as far as the small lodging. So I think there's a way to go forward with this. And I just want to state alternatively, because we've seen it before, they could get a long-time local demo permit, they could get all these approvals, and they could sell it. So I think it's better to work with the longtime local applicant who clearly has so much love and wonderfulness for this community, rather than to tell them to pay all these fees when there is a precedent that we could set that could be much more favorable to this exact family that we want to stay long-term. I think about if it were me and you were trying to create a spot for generations to be able to live here, this is no greater opportunity than this. They found a cheap price per square foot. They're working within the confines of everything else. They're just asking for the city to not have what could definitely be constituted as anti-local permitting costs that just doesn't allow families like this to be able to stay. Or end up being house rich and cash poor, which is not always the greatest situation to be in. There's obviously more sympathetic situations, but still you want this family to stay, bottom line. I personally don't like the precedent being set that if you want to stay and you want your fees reduced, you have to enter the APSHA system. I think you moved here in the 50s, you emigrated here, and now we're saying to you, if you want your fees reduced, you have to join a program and you can't be free market anymore. You can't like own your home in the same way. I also think that's a precedent that I would not want to set. So ultimately, I would like to work towards, and it might not happen tonight, so I'd be open to continuing at least this part, work towards reducing what fees we can without setting a dangerous precedent, working within the confines of ComDev, and try to make it as right for this family, because if that can be done, this is the best precedent that we could set for our longtime locals, rather than trying to have them pay exuberant fees when hopefully they don't need to.
Thank you, Sam. Bill?
John, I'm going to do the same thing you did to following Christine's comments and say, wow, because Sam just echoed a lot of my sentiments beautifully. And I also want to reiterate what I said prior, because I'm not sure that my comments were understood properly. So firstly, I apologize to the applicants for having to be here to request the right to tear down the house that your family built. I don't think that's a good ordinance that we have in our community. I have been fighting against it since day one, and I hope to see it gone. Number two, I'm totally supportive of all the sort of primary requests that you've made tonight. I think it was brave of you to come here and incorporate the top of slope stuff and the other special review criteria that wouldn't normally and don't need to come in front of council, but I understand you wanted to present the total picture to us. I also understand that there is a cost to providing many of the reviews and permit services that applicants are asking for. There's a real cost to doing that. I think that we charge more than what that cost is on an individual permit basis, and I think that our fees, as compared to other communities, are extremely high. And that makes up that what some of what that overage is paying for, not all of it is attributed to this, but some of what it's paying for is our significant planning efforts that we do as a community, and a lot of the time and effort spent by the ComDev team to provide for those services. It's not a direct cost of providing those permit services. Is that a fair statement, Ben?
If we go back to partially, yes, and if we went back to look at the fees that are up there, in terms of paying for ComDev staff, a very small percentage of those fees go towards paying for ComDev staff specifically.
Okay. The point is the fees are extreme and they add up to a lot of money, as has been well demonstrated to us tonight. I do think that it's critical that we acknowledge that the free market provides a lot of employee housing in this community. It always has, and I think it always will. The majority of us sitting at this table live in free market housing. We're examples of that. I know many of my friends and members of this community that continue to live in free market housing and meet the definition of an Aspen local employee. Utilizing APSHA as the sole source of local housing is a mistake, and I think that was one of the most brilliant points that Sam made in his comments. And I do think that providing relief and options for locals, and I respect and admire the history of this family, but I look at this as either you're a local member of our workforce or you're not. That's all that matters to me. I don't want to get into the emotional side, and I don't want to be a jury of someone's localness. I think that's very dangerous and unfair. I think we have definitions of what local is and what isn't. So anyhow, I'm more than happy to approve the sort of three primary requests tonight. I'd like to have further discussions. What I would like to leave you with is an opportunity or a direction for staff to have some conversations with you on what we can do on the fees that we can effectuate change on. What I would recommend is that we don't waive or defer 100% of those fees, but I think deferral is the most fair approach, and I think we come up with some percentage to defer into the future. So that's the direction that I would like to give staff leaving this meeting, and then you can come back at a subsequent meeting for approval of that if it's acceptable to all parties. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. I think I have a sense of where this is going. I just have a few comments, and then I'll try to capture a direction for staff. I was at the ACRA meeting this morning, and one of their members gave an update report. All the members do as they go around the table. And they said that Aspen real estate now is selling at $6,000 a square foot. It's kind of where it seems to be at. And the average single-family home prices are at $15 million. That's kind of an average. It was surprising to see how high they are in Carbondale and Basalt. Carbondale is actually higher than Basalt. But that is the community we have created, all of us in the room. This is the community value that we've created. And a lot of it's been created by really tough policies on growth control, on not sprawling out throughout Pickens County, out through the airport, urban growth boundaries that have existed. We've squeezed the balloon so hard that this is part of where it has come out of. And I think that we take value back from this having not turned into Silverthorne, or having not turned into Vale, or not having turned into these things, because the growth pressures were always there, and the pressures to overdevelop or redevelop again and again. So, this family will be able to tap that value in what they've created and the sacrifices they've made. When the home is built and it has no deed restriction whatsoever, it would certainly be eligible for a loan from a bank of a lot of the value without having to sell it. And that, again, this is values we've created for all of ourselves as a community, perhaps other than those who are in the affordable housing program, because that is capped. That their value is capped, and they're here as workers, and they are here who are thrown out if they are not working. And there are some who would like to see the affordable housing program really only be about workers and worker hours and not about community. I think if it weren't for that affordable housing program, we wouldn't have a successful community at all. And the recent growth numbers out of Pickens County ComDev have said that over 60% of our workforce now commutes from outside of Pickens County, and even larger percent, I think it was 9% of that, come over 50 miles a day in each direction to serve us, to create the value that we have. And so everything is related. It's an interrelated web. And I am, as others have expressed at the table, perhaps more elegantly than myself, very sympathetic to the high cost that is driving people out or making the choice to move to Grand Junction, and it's not for the weather, but because of the affordability. And I do not want to see that happening either. I share that with you, Bill, and I share that with the rest of this board. But I don't see, I don't want APSHA to have become the bad guy in this, because they're the ones we asked to enforce RO regulations. You know, I think most people think of APSHA as the category units, and are people fulfilling their work hours? And I don't think that RO really kind of falls in that same category. RO homes are selling for $2 million or more at the Airport Business Center. It's not really what people traditionally think of, and certainly not the people who are waiting tables and cleaning hotel rooms and doing a lot of the lawn maintenance for the remainder of our community. So I really want to just leave it there for my own personal comments. This tears me up. It's tough. It's not easy what we have created for ourselves here. In terms of fees, I don't, I'd like to see us come back with what sort of general fund contribution we would need to make to even out the fees that we are not charging if we were not charging fees. So we can discuss those more on a one-on-one basis. I think, again, what would be the potential of RO restriction on one of the condominiumized units as opposed to both the full structure? Are there other districts that you're applying to? Are you going to sanitation district and asking them if they, and make the same case, will they waive their fees? Is the school district interested in foregoing their $1,000? I mean, it's only $1,000, so maybe that make a difference to them. Maybe it wouldn't when they look at all the kids they have to provide for. We are, I believe, clear in the top of slope, and stream margin review is a settled matter. The demolition permit is a settled matter. The matter that remains is the waiving of fees. And I just like to get a sense from staff of how we could set up a program that others have talked about for a deferral, or that mimics the small lodge program. What would be the type of guidelines that would really keep this narrow and safeguard it? And for me, 20 years is way too short. That goes by in the blink of an eye.
Well, a couple of comments. First, the RO process. Yep. The RO process, should there be any interest in that, is a relatively straightforward process. We could talk about the specifics of the deed restriction with the applicant through APSHA. It would be a voluntary process, and in terms of land use or anything else like that, it's administrative in nature. Mm-hmm. The biggest issue, I think, would be navigating the terms of the deed restriction. So I don't think that that is a, sort of an administrative burden or a huge burden on the applicant if that was something that had any interest in proceeding. I will say that council has asked for, and staff's ready, we're going to be likely bringing a code amendment later this summer about the issuance of affordable housing credits for voluntary RO designation and other sort of RO construction that's currently not available. So that might be another thing of interest to the applicant as they're thinking about this.
Let me
Yeah.
slow you down to say, you're looking at being able to issue housing credits, which are of a monetary value.
Correct.
To someone who is able to preserve.
Creates an RO unit through any
Creates an RO
mechanism.
unit, and so that might be something that's mitigation in a different form for the family to come closer to covering costs.
Think about the value that was being generated by the redevelopment. So I wanted to throw that out there. In terms of fee waivers, the deferral agreement for the affordable housing mitigation is a clearly established thing. We've got the agreement written. That's very straightforward. It's code prescribed. I think your discussion this evening gives staff and APSHA the path to move forward on that. So we don't have any questions about the deferral agreement for the affordable housing mitigation. So that's a resolved issue from staff's perspective. If there is a desire for direction from staff to work towards an agreement of some sort, a deferral agreement of some sort, something that's parallel to the small lodge preservation program where we sort of waive building permit fees, a portion of that list that was up previously is included in that same program. I don't have code provisions for it. We don't have any review criteria for who might qualify for that. But it's certainly something that we can work on and bring back. I would, again, and I think this is staff's larger caution about this whole discussion is, I think when we create one-off situations, regardless of the compelling nature of the request, it does create concerns for staff, to be as frank as I possibly can. And so if we were going to respond to this in some way, and give some space for situations like this, I would encourage a program of some sort that creates a very clear, bright line of who can qualify and the mechanism through which the community can be made whole if, 10 years from now, this home is sold back out into the market to a non-resident. Could that be a deferral agreement? I think there's a few different mechanisms that could take that shape. I think if it's a straight deferral, parallel to the affordable housing, certainly we could come up with that. Would not be difficult, nor would I think replicating the small lodge preservation program. But again, I would like to see it be codified and have a program established with it as we have for other things.
Thank you for that, Ben. That gives us a little bit of direction. Bill?
Yeah, Ben, I think the most expedient and fair path forward would be to create a deferral program for certain fees. And again, it's not 100% of those fees, because I understand that there is a real tangible cost of administering and providing those services. And there are some that are going to make sense to do this with and some that are not. Maybe water tap fees don't make sense to do that with, but maybe, building permit issuance fees do. I want to give you sort of the grace and the judgment to look at that, but I think that we can pretty quickly put a program in place that says, if you are a local, according to whatever definition we choose, APSHA definition, you are eligible to defer this. It's escalated by CPI. When you sell it, you pay it. I think we could get that done quick enough that it would be applicable for them, and it would be a fair program that we don't have to sort of be judge and jury on who should qualify and who shouldn't. We already have those definitions baked in our community. So I'm super supportive of that. I hope we could get that done quickly.
Yeah. I will say in terms of ease and efficiency of that, the list that Haley showed kind of demarcating those things that we waive on affordable housing projects and the things that we don't currently waive on affordable housing projects is a good place to start because of the reasons that she described.
Yep.
In terms of where those dollars go and how they're kind of arrived at in terms of impact fee mitigation and entities outside of City of Aspen control. All of the things in that first list are things that impact either ComDev or engineering or kind of our local budgets as opposed to others.
Understood.
So that's, I think, where that list kind of originated from and why there's that break in that list. So
Get it.
anyway,
Yeah,
just
I get
wanted
it,
to.
and I also get that some of those, even within that list, really might not make sense to defer, any portion of. But others may make more sense to defer a greater portion of. And I just don't think it'd be that hard to create a table saying, X fee is eligible for deferment of 50%, 30%, 70%, whatever you come up with. I think that we could pretty quickly create this program, and I think it's super local friendly. It encourages locals to reinvest in their property. There's no harm to the community in doing so, and it keeps free market local housing a viable option.
Well said. The only question I have is a little bit time related. It sounded like the building permit was close to being ready to issue. Do you have contractors and people lined up for summer construction?
Not for summer construction. We still have to go through the permitting process, which is itself a lengthy process. So the goal would be to submit and have the permit process for a spring start of 2026, I believe is what we're anticipating. So
there is a little time to work on this?
There is clearly some time, and since
Okay.
well, yeah, we do have to submit, and that allow for that to process. So
Right.
how that works out, I think, and as I have the mic, is we're amenable to working, let's have this discussion. I think there are basic rudiments that, we would like to avoid the deed restriction for the reasons that have been discussed, but there can be, we're not asking for a blanket fee waiver, but we're looking at some reductions on various things. So, and, maybe there is a commitment to a length of time or something like that, but we would like to have some of these ideas. I think it's an appropriate way to go about this is to then take this and we can try to hash out, some of the details here. However, how we deal with making a submission of a building permit, for instance, an RO deed restriction is due at permit issuance. So can some of these questions be kicked to a permit issuance stage, as to allow us to move forward? I think that would be important for us at this stage.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a couple of comments in response to both of those statements from Mr. Raleigh. First of all, his description of the timing, if there was a decision at some point about a deed restriction pre-permit issuance. I will also say that on some of the small lodge preservation waivers that we've done previously, sometimes the sort of calculation or there's just a time crunch to get that agreement done prior to permit submission. And so in a couple of recent projects, we have had the fees, if we don't need to pull it up, but if in that estimate of the fees, there was kind of submittal prior to issuance and then there, kind of a total column. We have taken in the permit with those fees that are required at submittal, done the calculation for the fee waiver, and then incorporated that initial payment into the total and kind of refunded back to the applicant if there was a refund necessary. So just in terms of being able to submit the permit while we were coming up with a deferral arrangement or some other type of agreement, I don't think, one, it should take time. I agree that it's a fairly straightforward outcome. And I also don't think it would hold up your permit submission. We'd certainly want to have
So
this.
you're saying there's a path forward without?
I think so. That doesn't necessarily hold things up, that I think can reflect what I've heard from council discussion this evening.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate everyone's patience on this, and my own board as well. We normally take a dinner break at about 7, and we thought we weren't going to need one tonight. So I don't think we have any dinner down there. They figured it out, huh? That's good. Because we do have an executive session after the other hearing item. I think that what is appropriate now is 2 different motions. One would be a motion to request that staff come back with a policy resolution to create a program for lifetime locals, long-term residency, redevelopment policy. And that, I mean, we'll come up with a better name other than at this meeting.
It just rolls off the tongue.
But that we look at options within that policy resolution, because that is the way we proceed. We pass a policy resolution, the work can begin even before we pass it, but so that direction is clear from this board as to what we want our staff working on. That would include elements of alternate paths or potentials, such as deferring fees for a period of time under certain conditions, or that may be a path that include a type of deed restriction. They could be separate, they could be similar, and that we will look to what fees could be reduced as part of a reduction of fees as part of someone qualifying through this program as well. So that we can pull all the potential ideas that have been discussed at this table into that policy resolution as direction for us to look at, including the comment you had mentioned of potential of sales of housing credits for RO units could be a part of a path forward in this program. Separate from that policy resolution type of motion would be a motion to continue this item. And I'm just thinking it's probably more than the next 2 weeks for the meeting, so we could possibly get it together again in a month. What would you think on that, Ben?
If I may, and with the agreement of the applicant, it seems to me that the best path, if there's clear agreement from council on the deferral agreement for affordable housing, and that sort of being a part of the approval stream margin and the issuance of the demolition allotment, it seems to staff that you could pass that, if that's where you folks are, and give certainty to the applicant that they could pursue going forward with their project, with a second motion to staff that we work on a response to the fees.
Agreed.
That would be staff's understanding of where council discussion has arrived at this evening.
Our attorney here.
I agree with Mr. Anderson. So the proposed resolution before you actually doesn't mention the affordable housing deferral because it's an administrative function.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be in a resolution. So they already have that direction. With respect to the agreement for deferral of certain building and planning fees, I think you could add a condition of approval to this resolution that says staff and applicant shall bring back a proposed deferral agreement for the deferral of a percentage of fees that council has authority to waive, because, again, the land use code doesn't give Mr. Anderson, the authority to enter that agreement like it does with the affordable housing deferral agreement. So I don't think he has the authority to enter that administratively. We haven't landed on a specific number yet. It may not be realistic to get to that number until we get further along down this path, and I'll defer to Ben here, but I think you could include that to give the applicant some security that this is memorialized somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'll defer to Ben if he has a better suggestion on language. I was just trying to summarize what I think the direction is.
Kate, the only thing about how you presented it is it seems very precedent-setting without any guidelines as to who really qualifies. And that's why I was looking to, see if there should be a program created and a policy resolution around creating such a program. Because otherwise,
And maybe I misheard.
it's just like council now has policy that we can waive fees. It didn't sound.
You can waive fee. These fees there is a provision in the code that allows council to do this. I just don't know, to Ben's point, without having the applicant come back after that program is developed, which could take, you're going to have to go through 2 readings potentially. This could take some time. I think what I've heard, and maybe I'm wrong, and please clarify if I'm wrong, is that in this one instance that we think we have a good idea of what this program could look like. We could continue to develop that through, as you suggested, a policy resolution that will need to come back before you. But in this instance, work towards developing an agreement, both the applicant, because the applicant has a say in sort of what they're willing to agree to, and staff could be comfortable with after hearing the direction at this table. And I'll defer to Ben if he has any other suggestions.
Just hold on one second, Bill. I haven't heard from John or Christine in a while, and does this seem to be taking the direction that you were conceiving?
Yes, it's moving forward. And again, I want to see this succeed. Definitely not against waiving any fees, but I think we need staff to work on this a little more first.
Thank you. Bill?
I'd like to suggest that we pass resolution, or we make a motion to pass Resolution 72 tonight with an amendment that stipulates that the applicant shall be eligible to participate in any fee waiver, reduction, deferral program that might be created in the prior to issuance of their building permit. And then separately, we can have a conversation about directing staff on that.
Was that a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please.
I just would like to ask a question about the affordable housing deferral.
Please.
You mentioned that it is provided for in the land use code, however, it's an administratively run process. However, we would like that still to be a part of this policy resolution of, is there an alternative to an affordable housing deferral agreement?
Indefinitely.
Indefinitely, yes. So that, I guess, there's Councilor Rose's suggestion of a possible covenant or some other type of mechanism that is not necessarily an affordable housing deferral, that is a fee that would be kicked down the road at some point. I think that is one thing that we would like to maintain as a point of negotiation.
Yeah. At this point, staff does not have a mechanism to contemplate that. And that would not be a simple response. The others, I have models of things that I could use, that staff could use to craft that. And I will just say, I think the deferral agreement does what it is intending to do, that allows that fee to be waived in perpetuity until it no longer becomes housing for locals.
It accomplishes the purpose it's
And
there
so
for.
from staff's perspective, without some other kind of mechanism for, and I don't know what the mechanism would be.
Deed restriction as a RO
Well, yes.
is the other
Yeah,
mechanism.
and so I don't have a clear understanding of what the mechanism would be to allow that to happen while still maintaining the integrity of the mitigation program.
What about the small lodging example you gave?
That is not part of the small lodge preservation program. That is specific to building permit fees.
But that example, that template, can that be explored in this situation that we just talked about?
Again, without,
We,
just say that the issues that are involved in that are fundamentally different than the building permit fees that are at the topic.
This is why I was leading towards the idea of a continuation, because to work out the details of a unknown and, undefined program at the table doesn't make sense. And so, that's where, you want an approval tonight to go forward, as Bill has suggested and made a motion, and it's most of what you want, and I don't know if that could be amended to include the potential that they could take advantage of, and you're already saying it, of any program that comes forward. So I think, Sam, what you're looking for, and maybe what the applicant's representative is looking for, is already covered in the, yes, they will be eligible to apply for whatever comes from a future program.
I would be amenable to amending my motion to say that they explicitly can participate in the pre-existing affordable housing mitigation fee deferment program, but I personally am not supportive of a total waiver indefinitely of the affordable housing fee. I think what the program that we have in place is reasonable and fair and sort of protects the interest of non-RO affordable housing. So if that's meaningful to Patrick and the applicant, I'm happy to amend it that way.
I apologize, I was conferring with my the applicant, trying to figure out, what, could you repeat that again?
Sure,
please?
I'd be happy to amend the motion to say that if this matters to you, although I'm not sure it would matter to me, but if you want it included in the resolution that, this is a resolution, right? Yes, in the resolution, that the applicant can explicitly participate in the pre-existing affordable housing mitigation fee deferment program, I'm fine with that, but I'm personally just not supportive of the total waiver or extinguishment of it. I think that program is fair for the broad community. I understand that this circumstance, there's some compelling arguments against it, but again, I look at this as sort of black and white. It's either you meet the definition of APSHA local or you don't, and I think that's the only way to look at this from my perspective.
Okay.
So is that important to you or not?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's either we can approve what we've been able to come up with and space to work out further potential fee reductions, or we can continue tonight and try to hammer that all out before coming back again.
Right, and I think we are in agreement on the fee deferral concept and working that out. I think it really comes down to this affordable housing deferral agreement and whether or not that's included or not. We are not 100% sold on that aspect. So.
Okay, I think we're heading back towards a continuation.
Well, there's a motion in a second, so I think we got to vote on it.
Yeah, and I would say
But the motion included the affordable housing deferral program.
It did not.
Well, no, it didn't have to because it's administrative,
Correct.
but it's there.
Correct.
Yeah, excuse me, here. We've, so I think, conferring with the applicant, we will, let's take the approvals of the non-issues. We will stay with the deferral agreement concept. And then it's a program to try to figure out a fee deferral process. Seems like the most straightforward way to allow us to move forward as quickly as we possibly can.
Great, so I'm going to ask you again, Patrick, do you want me to explicitly include, even though it's not required, it doesn't really matter if I do or not, but do you explicitly want me to include in the motion, since it's not in the resolution, that you can participate in the employee affordable housing mitigation fee deferral program?
Yes.
The pre-existing?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make an amendment to my motion to explicitly state that the applicant can choose to participate in the existing affordable housing mitigation fee deferral program.
Okay.
John's the seconder.
Do you accept that amendment, John?
Okay, do we need to restate the motion before we vote on it?
Got it? I could do it.
No,
I would
can-
recommend-
No, I'm asking the clerk, can you,
That's why we have recordings that I can listen back to, so it's okay.
do you feel comfortable? Okay. All right, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Benedetti?
Yes.
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Richards?
Yes.
And Rachel, if I may, you were talking about a second motion on sort of the instructions to staff to bring back this policy resolution, and I generally agree with what you said, but from my perspective, I'm not interested in quantifying sort of this lifelong local concept or defining it that narrowly. Again, I think I may be using the wrong term here, but I think APSHA has some definition of what a working local is, and whatever that's called is what I want to use. Those on the APSHA board may know what that's called, what the technical term for that is. But, you know, again, I want you to explore deferrals, waivers, reductions, those kinds of things. I don't want this to be overly complex, and I certainly don't want to try to narrow it to some specific type of person.
I don't want to throw the door wide open. I could see someone buying a vacant lot, building a $10 million home, and then saying, hey, I'm self-employed, and here's my receipts, and I don't have to do affordable housing with my new $10 million home. You know,
That program already exists. They are eligible for that program today.
You can create a brand-new home and have it affordably developed and our. Deferred, I know, I'm just thinking, my experience over time is that the higher the income category of the individual, the more enforcement is almost impossible to track. Are you really doing your own hours when you're signing the payroll book and you're in charge of the own company? And we've already had people scouting the rules. You don't, you find your tax returns asked for every year now by APSHA if you live in deed restricted, but the enforcement on ROs and the LLCs they create or other things, it gets to be a little impossible. I'm listening to this meeting today thinking about the case that was made to waive fees, and it wasn't about something that could simply apply to all of our future free market development as well. And it sounds.
So I think the part that might be getting lost here is you have to meet the definition of an APSHA working local. And as soon as the property is sold to someone who's not, those fees are due as escalated by CPI. There's no enforcement. It's actually a deed restriction. It's something that's filed on the deed of the property.
Someone has to enforce deed restrictions, or they don't, or they just.
There's no
not worth the
ongoing
paper they're
enforcement.
written
As
on.
soon as the property goes to be transferred, those fees are due if it's not to another person who's eligible. It's really quite simple. It's a covenant, if you want to call it that.
But perhaps at this point, we should ask our staff to come back with the policy resolution.
That's exactly what I'm doing.
No, excuse me, in a written form that we can consider and vote on at that
Perfect.
time.
I would just like
as
to take the
opposed
temperature
to-
of the others to see if we should be narrowly defining those eligible, or if we should use that APSHA local worker definition.
I think we can come back with an array of different ideas.
Yeah, I'd like to
based
hear
on
the pros and
what's-
cons of the two alternatives
Yeah.
you're presenting, Bill, as opposed to trying to decide at 9 o'clock at night. Or is it 8 o'clock? 8 o'clock.
It's 8 o'clock.
I don't know why we have military time up there. Okay, so we have passed the motion. We have staff direction to come back with a policy resolution that seems suitable to the board and maybe a couple alternatives and implications of those policy resolutions. And we will move on to the next action item. I don't know if council members think we could cut through this pretty quickly and then take our dinner break during executive session. I think perhaps we can push forward. Yeah. And this is going to be, we're going to move forward quickly with resolution number 75, series of 2025, the fee in lieu request. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you. Okay.
All right, I'll make this one fast. This is just the batched quarterly request to pay fee in lieu for the affordable housing mitigation.
I'm gonna fall asleep.
Okay,
So
thank you.
there's one request for Q1 of 2025. This is 1380 Riverside Drive. They are requesting 0.48 FTEs. They need a total of 0.94 FTEs. And the reason that they are requesting just half is because they have already obtained the other half through the Affordable Housing Credits Program.
Okay.
We are just ensuring GMQS's purpose of creating housing. These are the ways that folks can do it. And staff still supports this batched request due to the lack of affordable housing credits on the market. It's already gone to P&Z. Staff finds that the criteria is met. And P&Z approved the resolution on May 7th. And I do want to say that there was one condition of approval that I wanted to make note, and that is that the project be required to extinguish the affordable housing credits that have already been obtained prior to building permit issuance, and then be able to pay the remaining FTEs via fee in lieu.
Okay.
And that is conditioned within the resolution.
Thank you. And this is an action item. It is not a public hearing. Are there board member questions? Or is there a board member motion?
I'll make a motion to pass Resolution 75.
Okay. We have a motion, it's been made, it's been seconded. Nicole, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Benedetti?
Yes.
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Richards?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. Counselor Rose? I said.
You combined our names? What
I
happened
did.
there?
I did.
I know, it was Counselor Richards. I'm like, okay, go ahead.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Richards?
Yes, thank you very much. We have one other action item before we would break for executive session. Ruth, you may be interested in this one. It's more interesting than the last. But it's a discussion and direction to staff to initiate review of the city signs code and to stay prosecution regarding sign code violations at 935 East Cooper Avenue, Aspen, Colorado, pending review of the sign code. And I just would like to say, I think that this council has certainly been paying attention to the public comments we've received and letters in the paper and letters directly to us regarding this situation with our sign code. It's truly brought to light that there is a need to review the residential sign code, not the commercial or the larger thing. And so we would like to instruct staff to bring us back a policy resolution to review such sign code. It signifies, it's significant, it's council's commitment both to peace in the neighborhoods and to a longer-term solution to this issue. Unfortunately, it's often not what you say, but how it's said. No one wants to regulate what someone's free speech is, but there are certainly concerns about how you are able to broadcast those. And this council has not yet determined whether it's going to be a policy resolution that we discuss among ourselves to resolve with staff's input, or whether we will be putting together a citizens committee to take a look at some of the broader implications across all of our residential neighborhoods. But that is the action item, and I just was introducing it. I don't know if anyone has more to add or would like to make a motion along those lines.
I was just going to say, I know a few people who'd love to be on that citizens committee.
Well, we'll have to see how we can balance that out, or whether it's decided at the table. Ben?
I think this has been an unfortunate set of circumstances that have emerged. There's no doubt about that. I will say that I think if there is a desire to have a larger conversation about signs, whether they be residential or commercial, or really anything of significance, that is not limited specifically to yard signs, this is going to be a much more extensive conversation and a much longer time horizon in terms of coming back to resolution. I would caution direction about opening this up into a broad conversation across the community about all things First Amendment and those kinds of things. This ultimately resulted from some very specific time, place, manner signage regulation related to yard signs. I think staff is very prepared to respond to a narrow direction of that with a very quick timeline. Mm-hmm. If it is more significant than that, or if we're wanting to have a broad community conversation about First Amendment related to signage, that is probably not something that happens before the close of 25.
Yeah, no, thank you for that kind of narrowing of my comments. I appreciate that very much. No, this is about residential sign code and yard signs specific. The thing I would like to stress, and so I'm glad you spoke up, is that your staff has been correct in how they have pursued this. It is something that if you go, because there has been a violation of any code, whether it's an APSHA code they're looking into or anything, we have to look in and respond to violation comments that are made to us. And when you're there, if you can't unsee something that violates another portion of the code. If you ask the inspector to come in and look at your backflow in your home, and they notice that your rest of your water system has not been appropriately installed, they can't ignore that. And so this your staff has been appropriate, and I think that they have tried to just handle this gently and see it diffused, but it blew up to a much bigger concern, and it's unfortunate for the entire community. But I want to be clear that this council, to the extent it needs to, takes responsibility for not being able to step in sooner. But your staff, I want to commend them on the decorum that they've maintained throughout.
Thank you.
Thank you. So is there a motion and direction to staff to initiate a review of the city's sign code and stay prosecution regarding the sign code violations at 935 East Cooper, Aspen, Colorado, pending the review of the sign code? Is there a motion to that effect?
Do we need a motion?
Yeah. So at this point, we have progressive enforcement policies in the code. The next step would be for us to take it to municipal court according to those. If council's wanting us to stay that process and stay the court proceedings until we've had these discussions publicly and really examined our sign code and made changes if they're appropriate to meet with the community needs, I do think I need a motion. I don't need a resolution, but I do need action from council directing my office to stay it, and then also directing Ben's staff to prepare a policy resolution and bring that back for you during a regular meeting for discussion as to, the scope of their work on that policy.
Okay, so moved to Rachel's comments.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion?
I think the only clarity we may want to add to the motion is that we want to keep the scope pretty tight to yard signs, and not to all residential signage or expand into commercial signage. So I would float that to the motion maker as a potential amendment.
Happily amended if that's what's needed.
And acceptable to the seconder?
Happily accept that amendment.
Great, thank you. Nicole, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Benedetti?
Yes.
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Richards?
Yes, thank you very much.
I'm confused. What did you just vote to approve?
The paper will let you know.
Yeah, we are not moving forward. We're staying. We're putting a stay on the complaint that has been filed and that was found to be valid based on the existing residential yard sign code. But we are not pursuing that any further. And in the meanwhile, we are going to review and perhaps change the sign code. So, okay, that's that list.
So nothing's going to happen with that situation then?
It's
Potentially for a while, at least until we've had further discussions.
We're gonna
Until you have further discussions?
We're gonna kick that can right down the road. Kick that can right down the road.
No, I don't
Kidding,
think that,
but-
I don't think that's a fair
not. I
representation.
was-
We are not going further with any of the prosecution, which would normally be required by our own code going forward. And we are going to review and see if there's changes appropriate to the sign code. Okay.
Taking it slowly.
Thank you. And we are going to go into executive session. We will not be taking action in executive session as we are not allowed to. We are going to let Grassroots TV go after we go into executive session and come out of executive session in our dining room as we eat some late night dinner, so that way Grassroots doesn't sit around for an hour and a half and wait till we finish our executive session meeting. No. Sorry, Ruth.
Mayor, if I may.
Okay, and so to City Attorney, if
may.
you will give us the grounds for the motion, please.
Thank you. Staff is requesting an executive session tonight pursuant to Colorado Revised Statutes, Section 24-6-402, subsection 4, subsection A, for the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of any real, personal, or other property interest. Subsection 4, subsection B, conferences with an attorney for the local public body for purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions. Subsection 4, subsection E, determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators. The specific items of discussion involve the following: the lease, transfer, acquisition of real or property interest, and contract negotiations and communications with counsel regarding such subjects due to market forces, negotiation strategies, and confidential demands of the parties involved, necessitated by the subject of specific legal advice, which further disclosure would be detriment to the city's strategic position. The exact properties cannot be disclosed. The second item is lease for property located at 455 Rio Grande Place, Aspen, Colorado. The third item is the lease negotiations with ACRA. This, as the mayor has noted, the executive session will be convened in Electric Pass. Council will not reconvene in council chambers to adjourn. They will do so from Electric Pass as there's no more public business. This meeting will be recorded, and the recording of the executive session will be maintained by the clerk for not less than 90 days.
Thank you.
That is the request. Thank you.
Motion? I move to go into executive session.
Per the citations of the
Per
attorney.
the citations of the attorney.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it has been made and seconded. Will you call the roll, please, Nicole?
Counselor Benedetti?
Yes.
Counselor Doyle?
Yes.
Counselor Guth?
Yes.
Counselor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Richards?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Javier.